Okay, so we are on time. It's 8:30, so I think it's a good time to get started. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth annual Southwest Center's Occupational Health Research Symposium. I'm Janil Patel. I'm an assistant professor in the departments of epidemiology and environmental and occupational health sciences here at UTHealth Houston School of Public Health. And it's my honor to open today's event on behalf of Dr. Sarah Felknor, who's the director of the Southwest Center for Occupational and Environmental Health, and will be joining us shortly. Dr. Vanessa Casanova, who is the director of the Southwest Center for Agricultural Health, Injury Prevention, and Education, also known as the Southwest Ag Center. And my co-host and colleague, Dr. Kevin Moore, who is the director of the Pilot Projects Program at the Southwest Ag Center. We're thrilled to have you all here for this virtual symposium, which essentially brings together researchers, practitioners, and students dedicated to advancing occupational health and safety. And our theme this year focuses on the evolving landscape of occupational health research and the pivotal role that technology plays in shaping the future of work. Today's program, as we have known in the recent times, is a testament to the collaborative efforts between the Southwest Center for Occupational and Environmental Health, as well as the Southwest Center for Agricultural Health, Injury Prevention, and Education. Both these centers have collaborated well over the past 4 years, so this is our fourth symposium together. And this partnership underscores our commitment to fostering interdisciplinary research and innovation to address critical occupational health challenges. We are excited to have our keynote speaker, Dr. Jennifer Lincoln from NIOSH, who will be setting the stage with an insightful keynote presentation and also provide invaluable insights into the opportunities and challenges posed by new technologies in agriculture. Following the keynote, we will have a series of Ignite presentations showcasing the research by our talented students and early career researchers, and we'll cover a broad range of topics, which include all the way from exercise interventions among agricultural workers to innovative safety training programs. I want to extend my thanks to all our speakers, moderators, and participants for their contributions to this symposium. And once again, would like to welcome and thank you all for being part of this important event. I will now pass on to Dr. Kevin Moore for a quick introduction about himself, the centers again, and also the pilot projects programs, and our keynote speaker, Dr. Lincoln.
Thanks, Janelle. It's a pleasure again to take part in this symposium. Just a quick historical context here. During COVID is when this symposium began, and Janil had been in the practice of having an in-person symposium, and at the Ag Center we used to invite our pilot feasibility study PIs to come to one of our board meetings and present their work there. And during COVID, we started talking about, how are we going to manage the opportunity to help our PIs to network and to be able to have the opportunity to disseminate the work that they've been engaged in, and came up with the idea of moving the symposium that had been happening in person that Janil was managing to a virtual symposium and engaging both of the centers together. And I've jokingly said many times that this is like my favorite thing that's come out of COVID. So we've continued to have the symposium every year, and it's really been a great opportunity to bring researchers together and our partners. Pardon me, our partners and colleagues and things like that as well. One of the most enjoyable and valuable things about this, I think, has been when we have our dialogue and Q&A in between each set of presentations that we have. Great opportunity to have further discussion about the projects and how they relate to one another, potential future collaborations, and these types of things. So I hope that we'll all participate in the Q&A times that we'll have. definitely be thinking about jotting down questions you have, or we'll have chat and Q&A set up, which we'll talk more about as we start those presentations. But would encourage you to take advantage of that and stay engaged in the symposium. All right, so it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today. And Dr. Jennifer Lincoln. Another thing that for me was an opportunity to start working with a colleague during COVID, and I've really been pleased to get to know her better over the years and serve with her in professional organizations and things like that. Dr. Lincoln has over 3 decades of occupational safety and health experience. And her focus has been on preventing traumatic injuries among workers in high-risk industries, which I think all of us can relate to. Since 2020, she's led the NIOSH Office of Agricultural Safety and Health. And in this role, she works to promote a national research strategy for evidence-based improvements in occupational safety and health for all agriculture, forestry, and fishing workers. She worked for I think 28 years in Alaska, really being heavily engaged in these kinds of opportunities for workplace safety improvements in the U.S. Public Health Service there. And she was really engaged heavily in the commercial fishing industry. So we have appreciated her engagement at the national level within agricultural safety and health. In her role, she represents NIOSH in policy and strategic discussions with key decision makers from other federal agencies, international partner agencies and governments, industry and labor organizations, as well as academic institutions on topics that are related to ag, forestry, and fishing, occupational safety, and health. Dr. Lincoln is a certified safety professional, and she earned her PhD in health policy and management with an emphasis on occupational injury control from Johns Hopkins University. Very pleased to have her joining us this morning and look forward to hearing her remarks during her keynote address today. So Dr. Lincoln, with that, I will turn it over to you, and thank you so much for joining us together and sharing your thoughts on this important topic.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. So let's see if we can, this is the hardest part for me. All right, are you seeing my title slide?
Yes, everything is perfect.
All right, terrific. That's great. So hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here. Some of my favorite events that occur across the country are when ag centers and ERCs, as well as total worker health centers, get together to put on scientific symposiums such as this one. And I am flattered to be asked to deliver the keynote. So thank you, Kevin, for inviting me to do this. And thanks for the whole organizing committee for allowing him to. So the invitation said I could talk about any topic, and that was challenging for me to just pick one, but I'm excited to talk about the future of work in agriculture and technology and occupational safety and health. So let me go ahead and get on to it. So I thought about, I wasn't sure how many people were going to be completely familiar with the NIOSH Office of Ag Safety and Health or the NIOSH Ag Forestry Fishing Program. So the first couple of slides I just want to give you a bit more introduction as to what NIOSH is, what the Office of Ag Safety and Health Office is, and then I want to make sure that folks know about our regional ag centers. So my office, the Office of Ag Safety and Health, is responsible for setting occupational research priorities for the ag forestry fishing industry. We convene opportunities and coordinate with various ag forestry fishing occupational safety and health groups on a regional level, nationally and internationally. And this includes the NORA Ag Forestry Fishing Sector Council that I co-chair. And we also participate in special projects as time allows. Now, the Office of Ag Safety and Health within NIOSH is pretty small. There's only 3 of us. Casey Elliott is the coordinator for the ag program, and I recently brought on John Gibbons as a senior veterinary officer to lead efforts that focus more on occupational health and on One Health issues. So when I talk about the whole ag forestry fishing program at NIOSH, I'm talking about a much larger set of activities. So the research and outreach activities conducted within the NIOSH Ag Forestry Fishing Program take place primarily through a network of regional ag centers, including the Southwest Ag Center. So geographically, these NIOSH Ag Centers are distributed throughout the nation to be responsive to any regional issues, but they also collaborate on national events and projects. So this map illustrates the locations of the ag centers across the country. It also indicates the National Children's Center for Rural and Agriculture Health and Safety, which is located in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And then other locations noted on this map include Cincinnati, Ohio, where the Office of Ag Safety and Health is located, and also Spokane, Washington, and Anchorage, Alaska locations where the fishing safety activities take place within NIOSH. So to promote the occupational safety and health needs of ag forestry fishing workers, my office has identified several other offices within NIOSH and the CDC that have similar goals and objectives that we can work with to advance the research portfolio and outreach activities for the ag forestry fishing industry. So this slide shows our priorities for 2024, and some of these are getting involved with ongoing intramural or CDC activities, and others are special projects that John and Casey and I are pursuing. So the Office of Ag Safety and Health is involved in the current DHHS Secretary's initiative on farm worker exposure to heat and smoke. We are also involved in the ongoing CDC response to H5N1. And the rest of these topics are things that we are working on to continue to promote agriculture and occupational safety and health. So this talk today, we're going to focus on the future of work and technology in agriculture. So there are a variety of factors driving the development of robotics and automation in agriculture. And occupational safety and health researchers have a role to understand how to mitigate risks and benefit the health and safety of ag workers. Many jobs within agriculture are commonly referred to as the 3Ds, dirty, dangerous, and demanding. I would also add that you could add a couple more Ds, dull or difficult, but the 3D moniker is not without merit. Agriculture is consistently one of the most hazardous industries in the United States. In 2020, the US ag forestry and fishing industry had a rate of 21.5 fatal injuries per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers, which is approximately 6 times the average for all private industries. Ag work takes place primarily outdoors in all weather, with workers performing repetitive and physically demanding tasks for extended hours, especially during busy seasons such as planting and harvesting. Labor shortages are common within the sector, and programs like the H-2A Temporary Worker Program have expanded from 75,000 certified jobs in 2010 to 275,000 in 2020 to partially fill increasing demand. Additionally, the average age of workers in agriculture is increasing. And despite the physical nature of ag work, in 2017, the average age of a farmer was 57.5 years old and nearly 39 years old for farm workers. However, it's not just the nature of ag work or the workforce that drives the development of robotics and automation. A variety of outside factors are affecting the ag industry. The uncertainty of a changing climate, including the increased frequency of natural disasters such as floods, wildfires, and droughts, has put an increased financial and psychological burden on ag producers. The industry is facing labor, economic, and environmental challenges in the face of in the face of these challenges, the ag workplace, workforce, and how work is accomplished is changing. And this is noted in the Future of Work editorial that Dr. Howard and I published in 2022. This is occurring not only to meet increased demand for food and other agricultural products, but also to adapt to a rapidly changing world. So the fourth industrial revolution has been described not only by the velocity of transformation of how we work, but also by the integration of scientific and technical disciplines to a level in which digital, biological, and physical components communicate and collaborate seamlessly. Technology in the fourth industrial revolution centers on robotics and automated machines and processes, artificial intelligence and data analytics, the Internet of Things and smart sensors, as well as augmented reality and wearable technology. And while some new robotics and automated machines are available commercially, most are still being developed. For example, this paper found that around the world, only 19% of new agricultural robots and automated machines were currently on the market, meaning more than 80% of them are still in the development phase. This provides occupational safety and health researchers an unprecedented opportunity to assess the risks that these new technologies may pose, make evidence-based recommendations on what additional tasks to automate, and collaborate to ensure emerging technologies will mitigate risks and benefits of health, safety, and well-being of agricultural workers. Researchers can also anticipate the safety and health training and education needs of the future workforce. To this end, NIOSH is undertaking efforts to facilitate dialogue and address potential benefits and hazards of emerging technologies in agriculture. So what exactly is NIOSH doing? The NIOSH Office of Ag Safety and Health is working to better understand how the advancements in automation and robotics is affecting the occupational safety and health and well-being of workers in the ag industry through the following activities. So this is being done through reviewing existing literature, setting occupational safety and health research priorities through the NIOSH Center for Robotics Research, creating opportunities such as workshops for researchers to understand the need for projects in agriculture and to connect with industry developing these technologies. So I will now go through and provide some details about these three activities. In 2020, we partnered with other NIOSH colleagues and conducted a literature review to identify research related to emerging agriculture technologies. Our aims were to, one, determine which technologies are being developed and used in an agriculture setting. Two, investigate the safety and health risks associated with these technologies. And three, identify ways in which occupational safety and health researchers and experts can better collaborate with current efforts focused on the development of robotics and automated technologies. We reported separate summary findings for technologies related either to animals and livestock versus crops and harvesting, since these work settings are different and the hazards associated with them are different. This literature review revealed a wide variety of robotics and automation being developed to aid in planting and seeding, in weeding, in weed control, and in harvesting of crops. Other articles revealed innovations in automated milking machines, milk and pallet feeders, and automated cleaners and scrapers. Technology is also being created to monitor not only the location of animals, but also animals' health, such as, for example, monitoring cattle health, disease detection, lameness, and animal behavior. So our review found that the primary focus of articles was on the development of the technology itself, as well as any potential productivity increases. However, little research described potential impacts, either positive or negative, that occur to workers' safety and health should the technology be adopted. Robotics and automation can be used to reduce occupational safety and health risks among workers by removing workers from job tasks that are high risk. For example, automating tasks inside a grain bin or assigning these tasks to robots would reduce the risk of workers entering these confined spaces. On the other hand, there is also the potential for injuries due to contact with robots, increased distraction in workers, and distrust or uncertainty and stress of using a robot at work are hazards to be considered. However, in the scientific literature published during 2015 to 2020, which is what we looked at, very few articles evaluated the impact of occupational health and safety of workers after the adoption of technology, and future research is needed to identify hazards and potential benefits to workers in an ag setting. So now I'd like to move on to describe the NIOSH Center for Occupational Robotics Research. So this center provides scientific leadership to guide the development and use of occupational robotics that enhance worker safety and health and well-being. The center helps to increase the understanding of human and machine interactions to ensure human worker safety, improving the ability to identify and track injuries and fatalities involving automation and robotics, and providing guidance on worker safety on working safely with automation and robotics in all industries. Several areas of research are needed to understand the benefits these technologies have on reducing worker safety and health risk, as well as whether hazards have been introduced. The NIOSH Office of Ag Safety and Health uses the research needs the NIOSH Center for Occupational Robotics Research has developed to advance research in the ag industry. These include surveillance research focusing on methods and techniques for systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of data on injuries associated with robots, basic and etiologic research to use data to identify patterns to understand risk behaviors, risk factors contributing to robot-related injuries, such as human-robot interface, intervention research to evaluate robotics technologies as interventions to improve worker safety, and evaluation of control technologies to improve worker safety around robots. And finally, translation research to understand the aids and barriers to translating occupational robotics research findings into practice. So the Office of Ag Safety and Health also identified the need for a multidisciplinary approach and identified an opportunity to organize a workshop focusing specifically on automation and robotics in agriculture. So the Safety for Emerging Robotics and Autonomous Agriculture, or SAFER Ag workshop, took place in November of 2022. This workshop was sponsored by the USDA. A small team of academics, industry, and NIOSH personnel organized the SAFER Ag workshop to discuss risks and regulations and standards, occupational safety research needs, and impacts on workforce and society. Understanding the risk associated with agricultural robotic technology is very broad. This includes risk of injury, financial risks, insurability, and risk potential for different scales of technology. The area of risk is also related to the role that regulation and standards play in the development and adoption of technologies. This includes examining all policies to understand how they could affect, either positively or negatively, the adoption of new technologies in agriculture. Likewise, understanding existing regulations, standards, existing gaps, as well as the lengthy standards process allows insight into how manufacturers are factoring the safety and health of workers in the development of technology. The SAFER Ag workshop also sought to understand the impacts of robotics and automation on the occupational safety and health and well-being of ag workers. The research track wanted to identify additional existing research efforts and enumerate the gaps in research needs, including exactly what existing hazards could be reduced, what known hazards are introduced with the adoption of technologies, and how can we best identify and mitigate adverse outcomes related to the adoption of technology before it's implemented. Finally, the workshop explored the workforce and societal implications of new technology adoption, including training needs for displaced workers, identification of new skill sets, and educational needs, infrastructure and technology support in rural areas, as well as cultural and consumer implications that are anticipated due to these advancements. The workshop created a community of practice around issues related to agriculture automation and robots that was informed by the diverse experience, expertise, and perspective of the participants of the workshop. Outputs include a list of priorities in the 3 areas: risk management, regulations and standards, occupational safety research needs, and anticipated worker impacts and societal implications. Currently, white papers are in various stages of review for each priority area, with companion articles planned to be published in the Journal of Agricultural Safety and Health. I'm excited and happy to announce that the Safer Ag 2.0 workshop is currently being planned. It will take place December 3rd and 4th later this year in Champaign, Illinois. And the 3 tracks being planned right now will focus on human-robot interactions research, workforce development and training, and risk management and liability. So as noted, there's a unique opportunity for occupational safety and health research related to the development and adoption of agricultural robots and automation of job tasks. Since many technologies are currently under development, researchers can work to provide evidence-based recommendations. For example, through surveillance data, we can identify tasks that are high risk as potential candidates for automation. Occupational safety and health research can also point out potential unintended consequences of automation for workers' safety. For example, an automated job task may save workers time and labor, but now they may leave workers with less time, with slower time during shifts, as there's now less downtime, causing mental fatigue and distraction. Likewise, we can share research and best practices we've learned regarding barriers to adoption of safety interventions, as these emerging technologies may face some of the same barriers. However, advancements in technology and agriculture are not waiting for occupational safety and health research to be completed. Therefore, robotic manufacturers and integrators are encouraged to develop consensus standards groups and best practices, and to follow prevention through design principles. This includes the efforts to anticipate and design out hazards to workers in agriculture setting during the development and implementation of these novel robots and automated tasks. The occupational safety and health experts need to engage and collaborate with developers of technology to learn about what emerging technologies are available, what is being developed, and what may be possible with time. Education and training of the next generation of safety and health professionals will need to focus on how automation and robots impact worker safety and health in agriculture and other industries. Partnerships and ideally research is needed to develop curriculum and resources needed for the future occupational safety and health workforce. It's also increasingly important for occupational safety and health researchers and practitioners to not only become familiar with existing manufacturing safety standards and gaps within those standards, but also the lengthy standards development process, if only to better understand how manufacturers are implementing standards. Better still, joining a consensus standards group to help shape new standards for emerging technologies may help to mitigate adverse worker impacts. So the NIOSH Office of Ag Safety and Health will continue to identify research gaps, support new research projects, education, outreach efforts, and the development of best practices with our partners. We'll strive to make connections across NIOSH and across the field of ag, forestry, fishing, safety, and health. As we move through the 4th Industrial Revolution with all its connectivity and uncertainty, we invite you to join us to proactively address the future needs of worker safety and health. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to speak. Before I end, though, I'd like to thank Casey Elliott as a co-author of this presentation, and I'd also like to acknowledge several colleagues we've worked with at universities across the country on this topic. Thank you.
That's excellent, Dr. Lincoln. Thank you so much for that overview. And I do think we have a few minutes for discussion or any questions that we might have. So if anyone in the audience has a question they'd like to contribute, if you would please just add that to the chat or to the Q&A. You could also raise your hand and we can give you permission to ask your question out loud. Dr. Lincoln, one of the things I was thinking about as you gave your talk this morning was related to the commercial fishing industry, and because of your unique experience in that area, I thought you might speak to what you see on the technology innovation side of things that could impact the commercial fishing industry with automation of technology, use of robotics, these kinds of things. So do you have some comments you could or observations you could make perhaps in that regard?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kevin. So, this is something, before I started working in this area, this was something that was being developed, I'd say, really in the seafood processing space first. So you can imagine that on a seafood processor that is out at sea, an entire manufacturing process that usually occurs on land was being conducted, on a vessel. And so they were already thinking about automation and developing machines that would eviscerate a fish as efficiently as possible. And I saw that continuing to be developed. And I want to say that the Northern European fleet was really the leader in developing a lot of that technology. In preparation for this presentation, I wanted to look at, well, what is going on in fishing? And one example that I can give now that's new since I was in the last few years is the use of robots in land-based crab processing plants. So they're using robots now to basically to do some of the work that a human was doing that is just still, they've just replaced a robot with they've replaced a person with a robot to take care of some of that initial steps of crab processing. I haven't seen it as much. I haven't seen automation as much I can't think of examples of using it to catch seafood. But certainly I would say that fishermen continue to develop efficiencies on deck, regardless of whether or not there's a robot doing it with them.
Dr. Levine had added in the chat, do you know of any activity in this area in Louisiana, the home of crawfishing?
I don't.
Well, it's interesting. I think about a lot of those repetitive tasks that you're talking about in seafood processing, but I also think about, watching shows like The Deadliest Catch and stuff like that, where I think everyone sort of got introduced to what do some of these hazards look like in commercial fishing. And of course, some of that's dramatized and those types of things, but I think we get a sense of how dangerous that work can be out at sea. And so it will be interesting over time to see, are there any technological advancements that take place that can help in that regard?
Sure.
We have another question that's popped up in the Q&A from Jonathan McFadden. I'll just read it to you. I don't know if you're seeing these right now or not, but he said, "Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Lincoln. My understanding is that in California, current regulations require autonomous machinery to have operators connected to them. But the initial economics research suggests that gains from autonomy in agriculture are much greater without these types of regulatory linkages between autonomous machines and operators. Where are we headed in this regard?" So I don't know if you have any experience to share there, but that would be interesting to know more about where we might be headed related to one-to-one control of robots in ag autonomy.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I think that that topic in particular is really what is driving the Safer Ag workshops and the discussion of risk in those workshops. So I think that the reason those the first workshop, and I trust the second one is was attended by, it was like equal industry and academic researchers, and I really think that the motivation there um, is to really understand how the body of evidence can be built to, I think, assist in the development of those autonomous vehicles. And really, I think that that's happening in particular. The policy debate in California is what's driving that.
Well, this has been an issue with drone technology as well. And I know that if we're going to have the advances that everyone's pushing towards in, automated delivery of Amazon packages and things like that, we have to move to a different sort of a distributed control. Whenever we have drones or other robotic technologies that are engaged in activities that are more low risk, you may have a different level of control than when we move into a higher risk domain. And so understanding that risk relationship can be an important part of that. I see
Right.
Janelle has his hand up, so I'm going to pass over to him for a second.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lincoln. This was very insightful and a lot of novel things to learn about. So thanks for the wonderful presentation. So in the context of all these emerging technologies that you discussed, especially in agricultural robotics and automation, what are the potential areas of focus for pilot projects that can effectively bridge the gap between the development of new technologies and the implementation of occupational safety and health best practices? I'm sure Kevin would complement these questions. We'd like to know how the pilot projects programs across both the centers can contribute to addressing the safety and health challenges identified with these new technologies.
Yeah, that's a great question, Janelle. So I would go back to that, the research agenda that the Center for Occupational Robotics Research has put together. That research agenda isn't specific to ag, it's specific to the development of robots and automation in industry. So, some of the pilot projects that I've seen come out of other areas are things like looking at ways to use the robots themselves to do some surveillance on worker safety and health. I've seen examples of people wanting to better understand the trustworthiness or the of working collaboratively with a robot. I've seen research done, pilot projects done on seeing if exoskeletons actually reduce musculoskeletal illnesses. So I think that that we can learn a lot from what is happening in other industries in regard to this human-robot interaction, and then see what is unique to agriculture, if there's something that we need to do. Oh, I had another thought. Let's see if I can get it back. Oh, shoot, I lost it. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up again. But I think that looking at that research portfolio, or that research strategy that the Center for Occupational Robotics Research has published would be helpful in, I guess, inspirational in identifying what could be done in the ag and technology space.
I think we have time for one last question. I see Vanessa Casanova had put a question in the chat, just asking you to speak to the future of the AgFF workforce. What are new skills and training that we might need to be considering as we're preparing the next generation of workers in this area?
Right. Yeah, thanks. That I could probably talk, I could give another 20 minutes on that, which I don't have. What is interesting, or what we don't have, what I think is interesting about thinking about the future of the workforce is, so I'm in rural Indiana. I'm talking to you. I'm looking out at the soybean field that's, planted across the road here, and so I'm surrounded by farmers who are my age and older. All of our friends that we hang out with are well, many of them are farmers. And when I think about this work and them, I think about, I'm not sure. I think that the thing that they're facing right now is like just rural connectivity, making sure that, because there's spots that there's no cell service, let alone, being able to get the internet while you're out in a field. But then, what's that word? I look at the other way. And I see then there's a young man who is he is my kid's age, who is starting a business that is using a drone to spray fields. And this is like almost second nature to him. And so it's really interesting to be in the heart of rural America and see this difference between what the farmers who have been doing this for years and how the younger people are thinking about the advancement in technology. I don't know that I wouldn't say that I am like a proponent for all of this. I feel like I'm someone who's trying to, understand it better and to say, okay, it's happening whether we want it to or not. What role does occupational safety and health professionals need to take in order to make sure that risks are mitigated? So I don't know, Vanessa, that really answers the question, but I think that it's an important one, and it's interesting to think about this across the board and across, all agriculture work settings, that, because each one's going to be a bit different.
Well, Jennifer, thank you again for your attendance today and for delivering our keynote. Really interesting topics for us to continue to consider. And, I think you really did a great job of kicking off broadly the issues that we're dealing with in the, preserving the safety, health, and well-being of workers, and pointing out some of the unique challenges in the agriculture workplace as well. We do need to transition now, though, to the next part of our symposium today. And so I am going to hand things over to Dr. Casanova, who is the director of the Southwest Ag Center. She's going to introduce us to the Ignite presentation format that we're using and what things are going to look like as we go through each of our presentations over the next couple of hours. So I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is our 4th annual Southwest Center's Occupational Health Research Symposium. Again, thinking about COVID and where we started this, and we're still going, and I think it's a great thing. I'm Vanessa Casanova. I'm the director of the Southwest Ag Center, and I'm also a professor here at the University of Texas at Tyler Health Science Center. Thank you again, Dr. Lincoln, for such a compelling presentation on the agricultural sector and the ongoing work on the potential impact of emerging technologies. I think that we are going to continue to hear so much about this. And let me just say again that we're delighted that all of you are here for this joint symposium in order to highlight the importance of the work undertaken by each of our PIs and to take advantage of this collaboration between the ERC and the Ag Center. We will be using an Ignite Talks format. Ignite Talks are dynamic and fast-paced presentations that follow a specific format to deliver compelling messages. Ignite is all about fast and fun presentations. So each of our speakers has created their presentations with 20 slides, each of which will be shown for 21 seconds and advanced automatically, giving each speaker about 7 minutes to present their respective research. We have organized the symposium by creating thematic clusters, resulting in 3 sessions. We're reserving time at the end of each session for discussion, so please feel free to engage with our researchers, and you can do this by typing your questions into the Q&A box. I noticed some of us put them into the chat box, and that's perfectly fine as well. And now we have the capability to, if you would like, you may raise your hand and we will call on you for questions, and you can ask it live if you wish. And each session will be moderated by either Dr. Patel, Dr. Moore, or myself. And again, really excited to have you all here. So let's get started.
Thank you, Dr. Casanova. I'm Janil Patel again, and I'm moderating our first session, the theme of which is training, safety, and health at work. And we have a really nice wide array of researchers from the Public Health Region 6. So I just want to reinstate that both these centers serve the Public Health Region 6, which includes research from Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Louisiana, and Arkansas. So our first group of researchers are from Oklahoma and Texas, and they will be presenting a wide range of studies that are related to training, safety, and health at work. We will be playing all the recordings, pre-recorded presentations for all these 3 awardees first, and then we will be moving on to a 30-minute discussion in which we'll be taking questions. As Dr. Casanova said, you can either type them in the Q&A box, or you can use the chat box, or even raise hand. Our first speaker for today is Mr. Nicholas Pulley, who is a doctoral student at Oklahoma State University, and he will be talking about staying strong on the job, a study of exercise benefits and beliefs in agricultural workers.
Hello, my name is Nick Spokely. I'm a PhD candidate at Oklahoma State University, and today I'm going to be talking about our research, which was titled Staying Strong on the Job, a study of exercise benefits and beliefs in agricultural workers. Nursery work, a subset of agriculture, is dangerous, and roughly 50% of nursery workers experience musculoskeletal dysfunction, which is caused from repetitive work-related movements and poor muscle strength and flexibility. These injuries reduce overall productivity and are costly. Exercise programs like Stay Strong, Stay Healthy can improve movement quality as shown in this figure. Here, Stay Strong, Stay Healthy improved 30-second sit-to-stand performance across 4 different age groups, and recently we found it can improve young adults' performance as well. So it may prove beneficial in nursery workers. However, there is a lack of research on on-site exercise programs in nursery workers. Therefore, this study had 2 aims. Aim 1 was to quantitatively determine the benefits of an on-site exercise program, and Aim 2 was to qualitatively uncover the beliefs and barriers to personal health and the perceived benefits of the on-site exercise program. With Aim 2, only the perceived benefits will be talked about in the results. In order to accomplish those aims, we used a block randomized, controlled, and longitudinal study design. Block randomization focused on age, sex, and job type and allowed for the allocation of 14 in the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy group and 11 in the control group. The control group was focused on just maintaining their physical activity levels, while the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy group performed 8 weeks of Stay Strong, Stay Healthy. Classes were taught by a certified trainer on Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. on site. Classes were an hour long and consisted of a warm-up, these 8 exercises, and a cool-down. Pre and post data collection began with 3 questionnaires. The first questionnaire was an in-house general health and fall risk survey. They then filled out the Nordic Musculoskeletal Dysfunction Questionnaire, which was only completed at the pre-testing session. Lastly, participants filled out the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. After questionnaires, participants completed a functional health testing battery, starting with the 30-second sit-to-stand and 5 sit-to-stand, which measure endurance and power, respectively. They then had dynamic postural change ability assessed with the 10-foot timed up and go, and flexibility measured with the back scratch and sit and reach. The 10-meter walk test was used to determine gait speed, while the hand grip and stork stand balance test were utilized to measure upper body strength and balance, respectively. After these 8 functional health tests, participants had interviews conducted on them by Dr. Bailey and her team. These interviews were conducted pre and post Stay Strong, Stay Healthy and were roughly 1 hour long. Interviews were held in a quiet, calm environment, free of distractions and other people. The interview questions were developed in thematic sections to allow for additional questions and probes and prompts with each participant. Statistical analyses included independent t-tests to assess baseline group differences and absolute magnitude of change group differences. Paired t-tests were used for within-group analyses, and significance was denoted with an alpha equal to 0.05. Inductive thematic analysis was performed on all qualitative data. Using the Nordic Musculoskeletal Dysfunction Questionnaire at baseline, we found that the low back, neck, shoulders, and knees experienced the most injuries. Further, females and those who worked more labor-intensive jobs reported more pain than their counterparts. Here is a descriptive table, and as you can see, this was a group of young nursery workers who were not meeting minimum physical activity guidelines, which are 150 minutes of moderate intense aerobic activity a week. Regarding baseline and absolute magnitude of change differences, independent t-tests did not reveal any group differences. However, paired t-tests did reveal an increase in sit and reach performance in the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy group, while there was no improvement in the control group. Further, there was a convergent qualitative data point where one participant cited feeling more flexible and more relaxed following the on-site exercise program. Paired t-tests also found an increase in 10-foot timed up and go, hand grip, and 5 sit-to-stand performance in the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy group. There were also 2 convergent qualitative data points, which not only bolstered the above quantitative data, but also showed that the program improved their ability to carry out job-related tasks. Lastly, paired t-tests revealed improvements in stork stand balance in the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy group, which also converged with the qualitative data in the following quote. So to summarize, sit and reach, 10-foot timed up and go, hand grip, 5 sit-to-stand, and stork stand balance all improved in the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy group. In conclusion, on-site exercise programs like Stay Strong, Stay Healthy may be an effective intervention at improving nursery workers' functional health, which may reduce musculoskeletal dysfunction. Further, there were benefits beyond physical health, as workers cited improved personal confidence to complete work-related tasks. Some important considerations for future studies looking to implement on-site exercise for nursery workers. The fall season is the best time of the year. Further, offering the program on 4 different days and at different times may allow for greater participation. And lastly, ensure the intensity of the program is high enough. I would like to thank a few people. First and foremost, all 25 participants. I'd also like to thank the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy instructor, Taylor Connor, all my co-authors in the MAX Laboratory, and then also I would like to thank the funders, so the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, and the Southwest Center for Agricultural Health, Injury Prevention, and Education.
Thank you. Our second presentation is
Hello.
from Dr. Justin Pulley, who is an assistant professor at Tarleton State University, and he will be talking about pilot test of a virtual reality-based tractor safety training.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Pulley. I'm an assistant professor down at Tarleton State University. This specific project is focusing on the pilot test of a virtual reality-based tractor safety training. Um, as we all know, agriculture is one of the most hazardous industries and areas to work within the U.S. for both adults and youth. Most of the time, we know that approximately 15 children die from an agricultural event per 100,000 full-time workers. Research has also shown that educators and students are unaware of basic safety and farm safety information and where to find that information. One option to train with this is virtual reality. This is a three-dimensional environment that can give us different learning affordances to mimic the real-life world that we're in. It could lead to improved transfer of knowledge and skill and give us richer and more effective collaborative learning, and also give us that experiential learning that we normally do with our live in-person skills and tests. VR has been used in several different industries for a while now: engineering education, medical education, industrial safety, particularly around operating equipment and mining industries, as well as tractor and equipment operation, which are teaching how to drive equipment and what are some of the safety components of that. Our guiding theory that we used to help the study was our user experience framework, which reinforces the different areas of a user experience that we're hoping students get out of this specific activity or experience itself. The purpose of this study was the guiding question for the study was, does virtual reality provide a realistic experience and a supplemental option for skill-based education? The purpose of the study was to determine the feasibility of a VR curriculum or activity to provide a usable and realistic experience for youth and agriculture. Our research objectives were to describe the performance of participants who participated in a tractor safety machinery course, determine the effectiveness of that course, and then we also wanted to describe the participants' user experience within that VR experience. For our study, we recruited youth ages 12 to 15 years of age to participate in an online curriculum. Students completed the tractors and implements section of that curriculum. They attended a 4-hour training session. One group trained with VR, one group didn't. They practiced for a week on their own time, and then they returned a week later to work through the certification component of that course. The VR experience that we used consisted of a safety information review, a tractor safety driving course, and an implement skills test. This specific VR experience was compatible with MetaQuest VR headsets, as well as being created alongside the National Safe Tractor and Machinery Operation Program. In this experience, students were scored throughout the experience through the different sections to get a score as close to 0 as possible. All these performance scores were saved to the students' headsets. For their scores throughout, their pre-check section, they had several questions to answer. They got 1 point for answering those questions incorrectly. During driving, they got a point for striking an object and 3 points for knocking over an object. And then during the implement section, they had some more questions to answer, and they also got 1 point there for any incorrectly answered questions. To find out their user experience after the experience, they were given a 69-question survey. All questions were on a 10-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. These focused within the constructs of that user experience framework. For the anticipated results, we expected the VR experience to perform at the same level, if not better, than a traditional training without VR. We expect students to also have a positive user experience while using the VR experience, and we expect them to obtain relatively low performance scores during this data. This would align with other studies, such as this one here, which looked at teachers' and students' perceptions of this own VR activity, which teachers said that it brought out new challenges for technology, but it also provided valuable benefits for students who used this in a classroom setting and compared it with tractor training methods that we traditionally use. Another study looked at the actual user experience, similar to what we would do, to figure out how were students' user experiences in that. Overall, we had a fairly positive user experience from roughly 132 students that used this specific tractor operation experience. As far as their performance within there, the biggest thing that we saw come from that were that students were not answering questions or were answering questions incorrectly. We think this may have been related to them not taking the experience seriously or how the teacher was presenting the experience to them in order for them to train. Throughout the driving part, we monitored how many points they got during their driving, how many light touches on an object or striking an object, and how many of them actually hit and knocked over an object. The total points ranged around 25 to 26 points. And remember, we wanted them to keep that as low or as close to zero as possible. Any other studies that were shown here also looked at comparing two different groups, one with VR and one without VR. And these two classes or these two groups here shown that there were no significant differences between those two groups that used those. So we had the same amount of students fail that also passed. So thank you for your time. I'll take any questions now as you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Our third presenter and the last presenter for our first session is Dr. Nicoletta
Good morning.
Fala from Oklahoma State University, and she will be talking about work-induced fatigue and burnout among flight instructors, impact on flight training safety and quality.
Colgan Air Flight 3407 resulted in a crash with no survivors after an aerodynamic stall from which the pilots did not appropriately recover. Both pilots were fatigued. Fatigue, however, does not just happen in the airlines. It happens among flight instructors too. Per the National Transportation Safety Board, not many accidents are attributed to fatigue. However, we observe an increasing trend in the number of self-reported incidents where the pilots mention fatigue as a contributing factor. Had they not taken evasive action, these would become accidents. In the Colgan Air case, the NTSB identified the probable cause as the pilot's inappropriate response to stall warnings. As a flight student, I had an instructor fall asleep in the airplane when he was supposed to be maintaining separation from obstacles and other traffic, and in general keeping me safe. The reports we studied included pilots who got themselves in unsafe situations while doing the same things they have always done, but in some sort of tired state. Specifically, they mentioned getting distracted and forgetting to take actions that they would need to have a safe flight. We took all the information we found through our analysis of both accident and incident reports and developed 2 surveys and 2 guided focus group scripts to collect data from instructors and their students on their perspectives of how fatigue and burnout impact them and their flight training. Our survey was administered online. It branched into a path for students consisting of Likert scale statements and open-ended questions, and a path for instructors consisting of different Likert scale statements, open-ended questions, as well as 2 validated scales to estimate fatigue and burnout. This survey resulted in 65 complete responses from instructors and 75 from students. Because of our recruitment methods, most of them are at what we call Part 141 schools or collegiate programs, and also younger. They are working towards their minimum hour requirements before they can get employed by the airlines. Our results show that most pilots get at least 6 hours of sleep before they go flying, but not quite 8. While most identify that fatigue impacts the safety of their flight, their ability to fly to standards and their reaction time, not as many cancel flights because of their fatigued state. Students were also able to identify the potential effect of fatigue on the safety and quality of their training. Obviously, they prefer to learn from instructors who are rested. However, their perception of the industry does not necessarily match their own experience with their flight instructors and fatigue. We asked them to describe a typical day in their instructor's life. Instructors estimate they spend 12 hours at work. However, students overestimate the amount of flying their instructors do by approximately an hour on average, and underestimate the time they spend at the airport without getting paid, as well as time spent sleeping by 30 minutes. We measured burnout using the Maslow Burnout Inventory Scale. We added scores on emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and accomplishment, and found that most instructors experience a moderate level of burnout. The depersonalization category received high burnout scores most frequently. We used the Occupational Fatigue and Exhaustion Scale to estimate chronic and acute fatigue among flight instructors. Overall, a lot of the instructors we surveyed are fatigued, which is concerning. The validated scales are consistent with the levels of fatigue and burnout that the instructors self-report. We also asked instructors to share their experiences with fatigue and students to discuss how they identify fatigue among their instructors. We have heard from instructors not canceling flights when tired, as well as students saying that their instructors will teach less and let things pass more easily when fatigued. We then used the responses in the survey to design focus groups, which would give us more information. We included 3 big collegiate flight programs around the country and separated instructors and students in their own subgroups. As of the time of this recording, we have talked to 28 pilots in person overall. We identified 5 themes in what the participants were saying, with each theme having 5 to 10 sub-themes. For example, instructors talked a lot about finances, like their level and consistency of pay, their benefits, and the impact of finances and student loans on their pressure to fly. Some students talked about actions their instructors take to ensure they are mitigating fatigue, like this first example. Most students, though, have noticed fatigue impacting their flights and the instruction they receive. Instructors also know that fatigue makes them worse at their job, but see no way out of it. Based on these conversations, we made a list of recommendations to reduce fatigue and provide pilots with more options. The easiest ones to implement include fostering a community and passion for flying through in-house events and fly-ins. A more impactful recommendation, but harder, is to provide better pay, benefits, and paid time off. Merit-based incentives, such as recognition by nomination, can also help reduce burnout. We need a mechanism to evaluate and help instructors improve based on their teaching rather than their workload. In future work, we plan to develop and test such a framework with instructors and their students. We would also like to develop and validate a physiological sensing framework to estimate fatigue in real time and decouple it from deterministic measures such as the amount of sleep. This summer, we will be gathering more information and presenting our findings on fatigue to pilots at the popular AirVenture Air Show in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I may be the one presenting our pilot project here, but my doctoral student Mijanur has worked tirelessly on developing our data collection protocols, talking to pilots around the country, and producing all of the results I presented. We would both be happy to talk further about all the details of our pilot project.
Great presentations. Sylvia, can you please switch to the slide which has the titles and our speaker names? Perfect. Okay, so now we are in the discussion for these 3 presentations that we just heard, and we have all the presenters here with us. So you can all type in your questions using the Q&A or even raise hands and ask us questions. Just raise hand and I'll make sure your questions are answered in the order, or you can even use our chat box. To get the conversation started, I have a question for Nicholas Spokley. Nicholas, you talked about the Stay Strong, Stay Healthy program. Can you talk a little bit about how this program compares to other musculoskeletal health improvement programs?
Yeah, of course. So Stay Strong, Stay Healthy was actually designed in 2000, and it's designed for older adults to improve their functional health specifically and kind of mitigate or reduce fall risk. Other programs that I say we as if I'm part of it, but that we kind of compete with our can't think of the name of it right now. It's a balance. A lot of them are balance programs, so focus on just improving overall balance. While Stay Strong again kind of incorporates weight training, which most of these programs don't. In terms of occupational safety, at least from what I've done with my research in nursery workers, there hasn't really been a program like Stay Strong that is efficacious like Stay Strong that's been, used to improve their not only health, but also work-related job tasks. So it's kind of hard to compare programs when there's just not a lot out there, which is why this was a huge pilot study, not only for us, but just I think for nursery and agriculture workers in general, with an on-site resistance training program. So
Great.
sorry, I don't know if I answered that, but
No, that it does. And do you have a judgment or an idea of how much of this program is being implemented right now in the current workforce, or any other programs that are more prevalent than this one?
yeah. So again, this program is very prevalent. It's reached right now. It's across 7 different states. It's being used in Argentina. In terms of workforce, especially specifically agriculture, this was the first study with Stay Strong. And again, I'm not familiar with other programs. I don't think there are a whole lot. Again, it's specifically focused on resistance training to improve their work-related job tasks. So.
Thank you. I see Dr. Moore has a question. Kevin.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for your presentation. I wanted to ask, when I think about, younger workers, agriculture workers, people that work in doing the kind of tasks that I know these workers are engaged in, I generally think about them being fairly healthy, fairly fit, strong sort of people. And so it was really interesting to see your results showing, a lot of gains that they were having in strength and these types of things. So I wonder if you could just reflect a little bit more on, how broadly you would expect to see us be able to improve worker performance based on these rather simple exercises that workers can be engaged in.
Cole, I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that last part of the question again?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, looking forward to how we might use these kinds of exercises for workers in general, but especially, workers that are engaged in these physical tasks. It's interesting to think people we would think are going to be fit just because of the work they're doing. Really, we're finding that there's great opportunities to improve their level of fitness from these sort of rather simple exercises they can engage in on a regular basis. So just thought you might reflect a little bit more on how you would see that being applied in the workplace more broadly.
Yeah, it was definitely very interesting for me because I, again, expected to come in, see the fairly young population of individuals, 20 to 30, well, mid-20s to late 30s. But no, that's not actually what we saw at all. They were fairly unhealthy, not meeting physical activity guidelines. Their performance was pretty low in the beginning. A lot of them experienced musculoskeletal dysfunction. And so it was really interesting to see. And then it was even cooler to see that the program was able to improve some of that. I used May. Again, we were underpowered, statistically speaking. And so we would like to do this again, have a bigger sample. In terms of more broadly implementing it, specifically to other agriculture industries, I mean, it's going to require a lot more thought. We ran into some issues, some barriers in terms of implementing the program on site with management. Season is huge, and I know depending on the agriculture occupation, it's going to differ, and so it's going to be hard to implement these on-site programs, especially in huge operations. So just going in, doing your homework, knowing the population, the management, and against the occupation, what time of year is best to implement it. We implemented it in the fall, which was the best. It was typically their downtime. However, it would be impossible in the spring and summer, and management wasn't even going to let us come back in. We wanted to do it again to get more people, and they wanted to do it, the workers, but management was like, we just can't. We don't have the time to have that. So, yeah, it was definitely difficult to implement it, but I think it's going to be. I think it's worthwhile. It's beneficial. They loved it. So, yeah.
Janelle? Yeah.
Dr. Whitehead, yes, you're next.
Actually, Nick, you got to my question right at the end. about whether it could be implemented even in much more formal programs. The people who need to do the or want to do the program also tend to want to get paid for the time, and management doesn't want to pay them for the time. This has been true in extremely formal settings with wonderful gyms and such in firefighters, for example. Even when they had time to do it, a lot of the firefighters just didn't want to go do it. Well, it's complex, but you've already recognized the problem, so I guess I don't really have a question, but thank you.
Of course. Yeah, it was really cool. The management did pay them. And so it was the start of the day from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And they were paid that whole hour, which again, I don't think we would have had the sample that we did if they weren't being paid. I know that for 100%. There's maybe 12 people that were willing to do it without pay. Everyone else was like, am I getting paid? Okay, let's go. So it was challenging, and I'm thankful for management for paying them.
And very briefly, hi, Dr. Lincoln from the NIOSH internal reviews in Seattle on extractive industries a long time ago.
Hi, Larry.
Great. So I'll come back to you, Nick. There is a question for you, but I think I'll move to other speakers as well. So I have a question for Nicoletta Fala about the work-induced fatigue among flight instructors. So Nicoletta, what areas of future research do you believe are crucial to further understanding and addressing the fatigue and burnout among flight instructors, and how do you envision your findings to influence policy changes within the training institutions and all the regulatory bodies? Yeah.
I think it should be more of a focus on what's causing the fatigue so we can mitigate that. Because we keep talking about, people are all tired, we're getting more tired, but in some cases, it's not the lack of sleep that's causing people to make mistakes in flight. So just figuring out what the connection is between the predictors of fatigue and then their performance in like real-time flight, then we should be able to address that. And I think also just going away from, I think the FAA right now requires that pilots get like 8 hours or 12 hours of rest time, which rest doesn't always mean sleep. It also depends on what you're doing the night before, or if it's like, if you're flying during the night or during the day. So things like that, we can move away from those numbers and more towards those markers or predictors that we can actually estimate in the flight deck. That should help the industry. At the same time, we have a maximum time that pilots can fly. So for example, if you're on a long flight of, let's say, 12 hours, you're likely to have 2 flight crews operating during the flight. And they'll switch at a given point. But if we have those sensors in the flight deck and the technology that allows us to figure out how they're trending, so maybe your performance is decreasing, then we can make better decisions on when to switch the crew and give the first crew a break. At the same time, with adaptive automation becoming a big thing in aviation, again, using those physiological sensors to identify when do we turn the autopilot on, when do we let AI make more of the decisions, and when do we go back to the human. So that's where we see the work going in the future.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Nick, for answering the question directly in the chat box for Dr. Casanova. We do have a question from Dr. Moore for Dr. Justin Pulley. The question is, I expect that youth expectations for the quality of video/VR is quite high from video games and other related activities. How does this impact the reception of these types of VR trainers that are usually not as well funded and have lower quality?
Thanks for the question. So far, obviously they're not, like you said, they're not as high quality as video games or something that's extremely well funded like that. But so far we haven't really seen any detraction from the overall quality of the video and so on. We have seen a few statements from students and teachers that have said that, you know, it's not as realistic as it could be. But, you know, obviously we can't fully recreate everything in there, you know. I mean, we have it real enough that they can reach down and hit the button to turn the key on and shift it into park and actually move the steering wheel as they're driving through the course. Um, they can grab a handle to mount the tractor the correct way and so on. So that's about as far as our interactiveness goes with that. And so what we really wanted to do was to give them that situational awareness of being on the tractor, looking around it. When they have that headset on, they could turn around and actually act like they're backing the tractor up. Um, and so it really gives them that 360 view of what it's like to be in that tractor seat. And that's what we want for people who have never gotten on a tractor before. So that was our goal with that.
Will the simulation roll over?
It's not supposed to roll over, but there have been a few instances where they've accidentally hit something, and I think it's been more of a bug inside of there that they have rolled over. So we got one crate that serves the purpose of them supposed to monitor their surroundings before mounting the tractor. Sometimes if they don't move that crate and when they come back around through the back end of the course and they accidentally hit that crate or try and run over it, it'll actually roll them.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
It is good because it gives them that and it gives them that other experience. But we do have plans on adding other, I guess, activities or areas within there. And rollover is one of those that we want to tackle for that.
Thank you.
I agree. So Justin, I've used VR quite a while ago and this was due when I was trying to play a game of mini golf using those sticks, right? So it works great. I mean, you can see the visuals are much more interactive, and you kind of get a judgment of how you want to put the force on that stick that you are holding, on the joystick that you are holding. One of the things that I noticed is what is missing is the pressure, the force, and the thrust, right? So even if you try to swing it so hard, you won't feel that thrust of that stick touching the ball or how much of the golf ball is going to go far. And so do you think any supplemental interventions along with a VR would enhance these trainings? And because I do feel like based on the environment it creates, I think that's the best you could get out of a VR headset. But in terms of the input, in terms of getting the feel of the actual force and thrust of being on a tractor or being in that equipment, how do you think would more supplemental training help this?
Definitely. I think adding all those different haptics and things with these headsets and controllers could add a lot more realism to that. We do have sound with it. They can hear the tractor start up. You know, when you take off and press on the gas, you hear the engine rev up a little bit and you hear it maintain that sound. When you let off of it, it comes back down to kind of like an idle sound. We do have small vibrations and sounds. So like when you hit a cone or knock something over, it gives you a vibration in the controller and a sound in your ear so that you know, and you can kind of feel something in your hands that you hit something. One thing was interesting, like is as you watch them, and the moment they press on that gas, that you see them jerk forward because they expect to move forward like a tractor normally would, but then it takes them a second to adjust and realize, hey, I'm not actually on one. I'm not moving. So we thought that was pretty interesting to see them already in the mindset to move with that tractor when they're not actually moving.
Great. And we have time for a last question, which is in the chat box by Dr. Casanova, again for Justin. How big a factor is cost in creating VR trainers?
I'd say that's the biggest 100% factor of the whole thing. This one experience, we roughly have about $40,000 into it. Now, granted, there are different programs out there where you can subscribe to it, maybe do a little bit of VR work yourself, but then you have to realize that you're not a coder, you're not a 3D modeler, you don't have that experience working in those programs. And so those subscribe to programs like that, you're pretty limited on what kind of interactivity you can get, the work that you can put into it versus having an actual gaming developer or somebody like that do it for us. So that's been my biggest factor, especially switching institutions, is the funding that's been out there.
Great. Thank you, Justin. And thanks to you all, Nicoletta, Justin, and Nick, for your wonderful presentations as well as for an insightful discussion. So in the interest of time, I think we can conclude our session 1 on workplace safety and health, training safety and health at work. It's actually time for a 5-minute break. Well, now it's a 4-minute break, but we will gather back at 10 o'clock so Dr. Moore can get started with our session 2. Thank you everyone again, and see you all in 4 minutes. Okay, so welcome back. And before we move to session 2, we have Dr. Sarah Felknor, who has joined us. She is the professor and director of the Southwest Center for Occupational and Environmental Health. And I would like her to make a quick introductory remark to everyone before we begin session 2.
I first want to welcome everybody. I especially want to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Lincoln from NIOSH. Great to have her present and be a part of this symposium. And congratulations to all of the researchers whose wonderful work that we have the opportunity to hear about today. And I also want to thank our partners at the UT Tyler Southwest Center for Ag Safety, Health, and Well-Being. And thank you for fitting me into your agenda, Dr. Patel.
Thanks, Dr. Felknor. Kevin, it's all yours, session 2.
All right, great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and just introduce the three speakers and their topic, and then let the videos play, and then we'll do our Q&A again. So as the videos are going, if you would just add any questions you might have to the chat. We're going to start with Dr. Boggaram and Dr. Wang, who are at the University of Texas at Tyler. Their project is looking at the effects of organic dust inhalation on neuroinflammation. We'll then move to Dr. Jinho Lee at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, looking at the estimation of respiratory deposition doses and the health risk for submicron aerosols and spray products. And then we'll end with Dr. Oni at the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center, looking at efficacy testing of acid-treated HEPA filters for the reduction of nicotine and particulate matter in a controlled setting. So look forward to viewing these presentations with you, and then we'll move into our Q&A period. So Sylvia, if you could go ahead and start the videos for us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vijayakumar Boggaram. I'm a professor in the Department of Cellular and Molecular Biology at the Health Science Center, University of Texas at Tyler. I'm going to present our pilot project to study the effects of organic dust inhalation on neuroinflammation. Our studies are in progress. As such, I am not presenting any data today. The study is a collaborative project with Dr. Yanyan Wang from the College of Pharmacy, University of Texas at Tyler. Recent studies have pointed to the prevalence of brain disorders such as Parkinson's disease, dementia, depression, and anxiety in agricultural workers. Occupation in agriculture, fishing, and forestry was associated with 46% greater odds of having dementia. Exposure to materials found in agricultural environment, such as pesticides, fertilizers, dust, pathogens, and noxious gases via inhalation may be linked to the development of neurological disorders. Airborne dust found in industrial livestock operations, also known as concentrated animal feeding operations, is a complex mixture of animal feed, animal waste, dander, microbes, and microbial components. because of the high density of animals present, the air in the CAFOs can be contaminated with elevated levels of airborne dust. In our studies, we will use poultry organic dust as a model agricultural or organic dust. Based on the epidemiological studies linking exposure to agricultural environment to prevalence of neurological disorders, we hypothesized that increased brain inflammation induced by organic dust inhalation has adverse effects on motor and behavioral functions. The rationale for our proposed study was that inhaled dust components can migrate to the brain via olfactory bulb, phagocytic cells, and/or extracellular vesicles to increase brain inflammation. Additionally, dust-induced lung inflammatory cytokines and immune cell activation could disrupt blood-brain barrier, resulting in brain inflammation. Increased inflammation can cause brain injury, adversely affecting motor and behavioral functions. We will test our hypothesis by repeatedly exposing mice to aqueous extract of poultry organic dust via intranasal instillation and studying effects on motor and behavioral functions and brain inflammation. Mice are exposed once daily, Monday to Friday, to organic dust extract via intranasal inhalation for 3 weeks. Motor and behavioral functions will be assessed by rotor-rod performance, open field, and elevated zero maze tests. Brain inflammation will be assessed by measuring inflammatory cytokine mRNA levels in different brain regions and by immunohistochemical analysis of brain sections. Settled dust from poultry house is mixed with buffered saline at a ratio of 1:10 weight by volume, and the mixture is exposed to ultrasound in an ultrasonicator bath for 10 minutes. Afterwards, the mixture is centrifuged to pellet particulate matter, and the supernatant is filtered through a 0.22 micron filter. The filtrate is arbitrarily considered as 100% dust extract. For inhalation exposure, mice are anesthetized and 50 microliters of buffered saline and 10 or 20% dust extract is administered intranasally once daily, Monday to Friday, for 3 weeks. Effect of dust extract treatment on motor coordination will be assessed by the rotor rod performance test. The rotor rod consists of a circular rod turning at a constant or increasing speed. Animals placed on the rotating rod try to remain on it rather than fall onto a platform some 30 centimeters below. An adverse effect on motor coordination is indicated by decreases in the amount of time that the mice remain on the turning rod. Effects of dust extract treatment on locomotor function and anxiety-like behavior will be assessed by the open field test. Open field test measures anxiety levels by monitoring the exploratory behavior of mice. Adverse effects are indicated by the display of thigmotaxis or wall-hugging behavior of mice and by reduced exploratory behavior demonstrated by decreases in total distance traveled in the central zone, jumps, and ambulatory count. Effect of dust extract treatment on anxiety-like behavior will be further evaluated by zero maze test. Increase in anxiety-like behavior is indicated by increased time spent in the closed areas. Effects on brain inflammation will be investigated by analyzing the levels of inflammatory cytokine messenger RNAs, such as keratinocyte chemoattractant or KC, interleukin-6 or IL-6, interleukin-1 beta or IL-1 beta, and tumor necrosis factor alpha or TNF-alpha mRNA levels in different brain regions such as the hippocampus, cerebellum, striatum, olfactory bulb, and the prefrontal cortex regions by real-time quantitative RT-PCR. Brain inflammation will also be analyzed by immunohistochemical staining of brain sections. Drs. Meghanathan and Kusampudi are conducting intranasal instillation of organic dust extract into mice and measurement of brain cytokine mRNA levels. Dr. Thab is conducting motor and behavioral tests on mice. This work is being supported by the SWCOEH Center for Agricultural Health, Injury Prevention and Education through grant support from the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. I'll be happy to entertain if you have any questions. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dino Lee. In this study, I will focus on the development of a new approach for estimating the deposition of aerosols and their chemical components, and applying it to occupational exposure to the commercial spray products. It is well known that the inhalation and the respiratory deposition of small aerosols could lead to adverse health effects. And to prepare strategies for dealing with those health issues, its health risk need to be correctly estimated. Before estimating the risk, the accurate deposited mass and dose of aerosol need to be estimated first. So many people try to estimate the mass of aerosols that deposit in the respiratory, and they usually use two kinds of methods for estimating the deposition. First one is using theoretical models, which assume that the aerosol has a solid form and ideal shapes. People also tried experimental methods like using airway replicas, but these previous methods were time-consuming and labor-intensive. In this study, we focus on the spray products because they contain various ANMs. The spray products generate small aerosols which are highly inhalable, and the aerosol generated from the sprays have complex and irregular shapes, so it may not be appropriate to be estimated by the conventional model. So we developed the MALDA, a 3D printed human respiratory system that was built to represent real human respiratory tracts. The MALDA is applicable to study aerosols with various shapes and physical characteristics. So far, people have tried to estimate the respiratory deposited mass of the aerosols experimentally by applying chemical composition data to respiratory deposition data or vice versa. So we have two kinds of experiments to estimate the deposition of certain chemical, but it could lead to error in results. So we connected MALDA to Moody, a size-segregated aerosol sampler, and developed a MALDA-Moody tandem system. The concept is quite simple. So if we compare the aerosol mass with MALDA to aerosol mass without MALDA, the deposited aerosol mass in MALDA can be acquired. Before this project, we only had a version of MALDA dedicated to nanoparticles, which we named NanoMALDA. So in this study, we developed a new version of MALDA that can represent the respiratory deposition of particles in the sub-micrometer to micrometer range. Develop a microMALDA suitable for micro-sized particles. We made head arrays of microMALDA, which is a copy of the real nasal and oral cavity of human. And for the TB arrays of microMALDA, we compared two candidates of TB arrays. And for the alveolar region of microMALDA, we compared three candidates with three different particle capturing abilities. To evaluate the performance of microMALDA, we did an experiment using a chamber. In the experiments, we generated spherical solid test particles with various sizes and observed our microMALDA shows reliable deposition patterns. So we repeated experiments with each candidate with their parts and finalized the model. And you can see the beautiful curve that overall deposition fraction, the dots achieved by microMALDA, aligns really well with the ICRP curve, which is our reference model. Then we connected this microMALDA and previously developed NanoMALDA to a Moody to validate the MALDA-Moody method. And here also you can see that the MALDA-Moody method, which is a black dot, aligns well with the reference model, a dashed line. Now we can estimate the fraction of the aerosol that can be deposited in the human respiratory replica, and also can collect the aerosol itself so that we can get its chemical composition at the same time. In the main experiment, we used two commercially available spray products, the most commonly used trigger type and propellant type. These products contain titanium dioxide nanomaterials in them. In the experiment, we sprayed the aerosol through the injection port into the chamber and collected the amount of aerosol that passed MALDA. In this study, we found that the aerosol generation rate of propellant spray is much higher than trigger spray, as you can see on the left two figures. And the interesting point is that the trigger spray generates aerosols with two size ranges, smaller one and larger one. And the deposition fraction from MALDA-Moody approach really aligns well with the reference model. This implies that the physical characteristics of spray aerosols did not significantly change during inhalation and respiratory deposition. Another interesting thing is that assuming the mass ratio of metal in aerosol is constant by size could lead to a serious error in estimating the amount of metal in aerosol. So analyzing the bulk liquid or total aerosol to acquire metal proportion can underestimate the exposure level to the metal. We can see the proportion of titanium, the blue bar, gradually increasing by increasing aerosol size. This implies that there is a possibility that the nano TiO2 aggregates themselves and forms larger particles. Along with the titanium, we focus on chromium and copper, which could lead to adverse health effects when inhaled. We use the acquired metal mass ratio by the size of the aerosol, along with the mass of the aerosol and the deposition of the aerosol. So by multiplying these, we can calculate the mass of metal that is deposited in the lung. And we also can assume the risk based on our exposure scenario, exposure factors, and guidance values of a low overdose. As a result, the estimate of the risk was lower than the criteria, which is a red dotted line. The risk of non-cancer disease that can be derived from each metal line. The risk of non-cancer disease that can be derived from each metal we are interested in, and some of them, which is a black bar, were also below the criteria. In this study, we developed a new method that can estimate the accurate deposited dose on aerosol and its chemical constituents. But we should consider that we only have tested a limited number of products, so we cannot generalize the result from this study. Thank you for listening, and thank you for funding the project.
Hi, my name is Toluwanimi Oni. The title of my presentation is Efficacy Testing of Acid-Treated HEPA Filters for Reduction of Nicotine and Particulate Matter Concentrations in a Controlled Setting. Electronic cigarettes have been in the United States since 2007. That's about 17 years, and they've been widely used and widely adopted. However, studies have shown that electronic cigarette use can negatively impact indoor air quality. Not just the indoor air quality, it also impacts health or human health. Secondhand exposures to electronic cigarettes can result in respiratory and cardiovascular issues, can possibly cause cancer and even affect the unborn. And nicotine, a key component of electronic cigarette aerosol, can also lead to serious side effects when exposed to them at elevated concentrations. To capture nicotine from airborne, nicotine, sodium bisulfate and citric acid have been commonly used in literature to treat glass fiber filters for nicotine sampling and analysis. So I sought to use either one of these acids after testing for their superior holding capacity and nicotine stability to treat HEPA filters in order to be able to capture airborne nicotine and reduce nicotine concentrations in indoor settings, after which I then performed efficacy testing of the acid-treated HEPA filters. So in testing for nicotine holding capacity, citric acid demonstrated or showed to have a higher holding capacity than sodium bisulfate. It held on to about 2,750 micrograms of nicotine compared to sodium bisulfate, which was at 550 micrograms. I then tested for stability of nicotine on the acid-treated filters. I had 36 chamber samples exposed to electronic cigarette aerosol. I analyzed some immediately, purged some with 8 hours before analysis. Another batch was stored for 2 weeks before analysis, and then the last batch was purged with clean air for 8 hours and then stored for 2 weeks before analysis. And my results showed that nicotine was stable. It was stable for all the conditions on sodium bisulfate. But whether I analyzed immediately or I stored for 2 weeks, or I did the combination of storing and purging, nicotine was stable on my filters. And similarly for citric acid also, because nicotine was stable on all my filters for citric acid. So citric acid held on to nicotine even when it was stored for 2 weeks or purged with clean air for 8 hours. I therefore use citric acid as my go-to acid for treating the HEPA filters because it had the higher nicotine holding capacity, and there was no difference between it and sodium bisulfite in nicotine stability or in holding on to nicotine. However, I had two different HEPA filter brands available for me to use for my study. Those that are termed original had the similar brand name to the air purifier I was using, while those that are termed replacement were of a different brand, but they were touted to be similar to the same brand HEPA filters. However, the replacement HEPA filters were of inferior quality and they had lower filtration efficiency when tested with salt aerosol. And so I then treated some of the original and replacement HEPA filters with citric acid, and this was how I did it. I generated citric acid aerosol. I pulled this through the HEPA filters with the aid of the air purifier, and the clean air was passed through an exhaust hood. And this was what our design also looked like. So after treating some of the HEPA filters, I then performed filtration efficiency tests using salt aerosol to challenge the treated and the untreated HEPA filters, and also electronic cigarette aerosol. I also challenged with nicotine vapor to test their nicotine capture efficiency. And the results were that there was no significant difference between the citric acid treated and the untreated HEPA filters in the originals, and same was observed in the replacement. However, the replacements, of course, were inferior to the originals. However, with the electronic cigarette aerosol, filtration efficiency for all the HEPA filters, both original and replacement, treated or untreated, decreased. There was no significant difference between the citric acid treated and the untreated in the originals, but in the replacement, there was a significant difference, with the citric acid treated performing better than the untreated HEPA filters in the replacements. For nicotine capture efficiency, both the citric acid treated original and citric acid treated replacement had more than 99% nicotine capture efficiency, while the untreated for both the originals and replacements were similar and was roughly an average of about 50% capture efficiency. So citric acid was able to capture most of the nicotine that it was exposed to. So in summary, citric acid treated filters had the higher nicotine holding capacity. Nicotine was stable on citric acid and also on sodium bisulfite. However, when exposed to electronic cigarette aerosol, both the original and replacement HEPA filters, whether it was treated with acid or not, had decreased filtration efficiency. And citric acid treated HEPA filters successfully removed 99% or more of the airborne nicotine. So citric acid treatment of HEPA filters for nicotine vapor removal is an effective measure for reducing airborne nicotine from electronic cigarette aerosol. I want to acknowledge the SWCOEH Center for Occupational and Environmental Health at the University of Texas, Houston, for funding this project. I also want to acknowledge the Department of Occupational and Environmental Health, the Hudson College of Public Health, University of Oklahoma, for their support in this study. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the three presentations that we had there. Sylvia, if you would go back to the slide just listing who our presenters are, I'd appreciate that, just to help everyone with the Q&A portion here. We did have a question in the chat for Dr. Boggaram that he addressed, but I wanted to give him just a quick opportunity to mention his thoughts on what we should be considering with future projects to try to understand about translating the work related to organic dust exposure on brain behavior towards potential future interventions to try to help address these issues with organic dust exposure. So, Dr. Boggaram, do you want to just briefly discuss that topic?
Yes, Kevin, thank you for the question. Dr. Patel, thank you for the question. I think the most important mechanism to understand is how exposure to dust causes neuroinflammation. So understanding the mechanisms that mediate inflammation would be very important. And the other thing is to identify which component or components of the dust are the major players in inducing inflammation would be very important too.
Dr. Boggaram, do you have any other thoughts on other inhaled toxins and how that might broadly apply to occupational exposures?
For example, like pesticides and chemical fertilizers and probably noxious gases that are produced during decomposition of animal waste, such as, methane, hydrogen sulfide. Those would be also maybe important players in inducing injury and inflammation.
Yeah, this connection between neurological inflammation and dementia was a newer discovery for me. And so it was interesting to hear more about this connection that we may have between neuroinflammation and these types of dementia, Alzheimer-related diseases.
Also, it can be caused by directly acting on brain cells. And also, as you know, when you inhale, the lung is another primary target too. And when the lung inflammation occurs, the lung can produce a lot of inflammatory cytokines and other, injurious compound molecules, which can travel to the brain and cause more inflammation. So in fact, there could be some crosstalk between the brain and the lung and other organs, which may play an important role in inducing neuroinflammation.
That's great. Thank you. Just a reminder to anyone, if you have questions, raise your hand. I'll try to catch those. And also, if you want to type something into the chat, we'll respond to those as well. Dr. Oni, thank you for your presentation. I was very interested to hear about these chemical treatments on HEPA filters to change their ability to absorb some of these compounds, nicotine in particular, that you were looking at. And so I get the impression you're thinking about some commercial public use application of this kind of filtration treatment. And I wonder if you might speak about, what sort of loading would you expect a HEPA filter to be able to handle? So if I was putting this in a workspace or a teaching space or something like that, how much volume concentration would these HEPA filters be able to manage before they'd have to be changed out and recharge, these kinds of things. So if you might talk about the potential application you would see for this technology a little bit more, I'd be interested in that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely looking to taking this to the field and to places where there are lots of nicotine exposures. As to the loading capacity, that would depend on the amount of exposures that I'm expecting wherever these HEPA filters are deployed. As you know, for example, a classroom environment, the nicotine in the classroom environment will probably be different from probably a casino where there's a lot of smoking taking place. So there may have to be some experiments or some study into that to know what the exposure levels will be like, and then that will determine how much loading or how much acid we need to put on the HEPA filters so that they are effective in reducing the nicotine levels.
So also a question for you about your focus on electronic cigarettes. Was wondering if you had considered looking at regular cigarette exposures as well, and maybe if you've done some of that work, if you have any preliminary thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's the next step for me. This was sort of preliminary, some sort of pilot to see if this was going to work, and since it works, then that's the next step to also look at secondhand tobacco smoke exposures.
I may have interpreted this incorrectly, but when you were looking at the degradation in performance It looked like the exposure to the carrier for the vapes, for the electronic cigarettes, was degrading the performance of the HEPA filters pretty significantly. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and we do not know why at the moment because it was a short study, but that was a phenomenon that we found very interesting as to why electronic cigarette aerosol reduced the filtration efficiency of the HEPA filters.
And did you test that with the salt vapor challenge? Is that where you got that data?
No. So we basically introduced electronic cigarette aerosol to the HEPA filters, and then we did the filtration efficiency calculations from that. So it was electronic cigarette aerosols.
Definitely a concern for having these compounds have such a degradation in the performance of the filter. So I think that in and of itself is a very important finding, and we'll be interested to see how your work progresses in that area.
Thank you.
Dr. Patel, I see you have your hand up, so I'll let you ask your question.
Yes, you kind of stole a part or portion of my question, but I think it's still valid. It's actually for Dr. Oni, and my question for you was about the practices, right? So the best practice for these optimal application protocols and safety measures, what are the best practices to maximize the benefits of this treatment, and also, on the other hand, to minimize any adverse effects for workers who are handling these filters? What are your thoughts about that?
So, well, for best practices, since we have not evaluated the health and safety impact of handling this, it would definitely be to use PPE, at least gloves while handling this till we know what the consequences or the impact will be as regards to having direct contact with this acid. I mean, citric acid is, the concentration we used is not so high, but we would still like to be able to evaluate the impact of whether it has adverse health effects when you come in contact with it or not. So for now, definitely using PPEs would be a best idea, particularly gloves when handling them.
I'm guessing no negative impacts on air quality coming out of the HEPA filters after the citric acid treatment.
Yeah, we do not think so.
Okay, that would be an important one for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Lee, I had a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question for Dr. Lee?
Yeah, please.
Dr. Lee, your presentation was very interesting. Obviously, one major difference between the 3D printed lung and the, human or animal lung is the lack of all the biological fluids that line the respiratory system. So how would this difference impact on the results that you have found?
Sorry, I had a minor audio issue, so could you please repeat the rest part of the question again?
My question was, one major difference, which is very obvious in your 3D printed lung and a lung from an animal or a human, is the lack of the biological fluids that line the lung surface. So how would this impact on the deposition of the particles you have studied?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. We also consider that would be a great, there might be induce a great error in our results. So which we choose two ways. First one is reducing the static electricity by using conductive plastic. And the second one is we apply the silicone oil all inside our respiratory tract, so they can act like a human or animal fluid in our respiratory system. And we think luckily it worked like a real fluid, biological fluid. So I think that's the reason why we get good deposition, just as the same as the real respiratory tract.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Jinho, just a little follow-up question on your model. You mentioned you had one system you had developed for nanoparticles,
Mhm.
and then another system for the larger particles that you're looking at for this study. Is there it seems like you're potentially capturing different elements of lung function here. So I wonder, are you leaving out some of the particle capture with the current system that's not optimized for the nano-sized particles, or are you integrating these together so you're trying to get closer and closer to a model of capture for lung tissues?
Well, first, the reason why we developed the micron method, which is dedicated to microparticles, because the plastic lung, 3D printed lung we made is not a real lung, so it does not flexible and it does not filtrate and or get small. So for each particle size, we had to make a different design of respiratory model. That's the reason why we developed two kinds of model. And our final goal is estimating the deposition pattern and its chemical composition in a wide size range that can cover from the smallest ones or the biggest one that could be inhaled in our respiratory.
So I thought it was really novel how you had connected the system to a more traditional sampling device to sort of look at what's the difference that we're seeing for particles from our, initial, what we input into the system, what made its way through our model, and then what were we able to detect on the back end for our size distribution. And so that's why I was sort of asking the question about, are you leaving out a portion of the capture that the lung tissues are expecting to have because you're switching back and forth between the two particle size or the sort of particle ranges that you're looking at. So I was just sort of wondering if you're moving towards a model that would try to incorporate deposition of all the particle sizes within the lungs.
Sorry, I think I didn't catch your question. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if your next steps in trying to develop your model would be to more fully integrate the full range of particle size deposition that you would see within the lungs in order to have a really, robust model for looking at all these different particle sizes.
Yeah, that could be our final goal. And of course, we are also trying to develop this model as it can good for estimating not only for total deposition, because people inhales and exhales the air, and so the deposition can be happen when inhaled and exhale, and there would be some detachment of the aerosol. So our final goal is making a final model that also can cover the full range and also consider the inhale deposition and exhale deposition. Yeah, that is our final goal.
That's great. I have one other question for you from Dr. Wang. So based on your study, do you think that engineered metal nanomaterials need to be banned from aerosols or have a limit set on those? I had a question for you. Based on your study, do you think there should be limitations or banning of metal nanomaterials and aerosols?
Oh, you mean the limitation of my approach, or?
No, based on your findings, it looks like your risk score was below the threshold. Do you think that, on that basis, there should be any limitations that are placed on metal nanomaterials in these aerosol products?
Sorry, could you repeat it again? Sorry.
Yeah, do you think that engineered metal nanomaterials or nanoparticles should be banned from aerosols based on the results of your study?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just get it. Sorry, my connection is really bad. So yeah, but well, that's a quite political thing, but Personally, I don't really think so, because some, of course, in Europe or other continent, people are trying to ban the use of nanoparticles, but some nanoparticles so far prove its functionality, but its toxicity is not really showing like a significance so far. So like in case of the civil nanoparticles, its toxicity is quite on debate, but it's a function as a cleaning or disinfecting. It's already proved. So I think it is still only to ban it to use it. But of course, if we can do a precautionary approach, I can understand why people are banning the nanomaterials. Yep.
I did think it was interesting that differences in the delivery system really changed the particle sizes that you measured and their concentrations. So there could be some consideration about what delivery mechanisms are we using. Are we still getting the sort of performance characteristics that we want to have from a spray versus an aerosol, and how that might impact product formulations and what we would want to use in industry applications?
Well, that's a really, really great question, because well, in my study, I could find that the pressure can spray generates much more aerosol when compared to trigger type. But well, so far there are many studies that showing the constant result as ours. So it seems that the propellant spray generates much more aerosol when compared to other kinds of aerosol. But the reason why they generate much more aerosol and the reason why they have different size distribution is not fully revealed. But of course, it is obvious that the pressure can generate much smaller and it generates much more amount because it injects much higher pressure. But well, it's still on question and it has to be studied.
Yeah, that's great. That efficacy versus application, I think, would be an interesting thing to look at, because could certainly influence some of the safety issues, and maybe could address some of the concerns people have about the particle sizes and the contribution of these nanomaterials. Yeah, thanks for your work there. I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions. Is there anything I'm missing in the chat right now? So, Dr. Boggaram, what are your thoughts on some of the issues related to looking at the behavioral changes in mice, and this link between their behavior and neuroinflammation? How are you? I know you're looking at both the histological information as well as behavioral, and I just wonder how those combinations of things are being investigated to try to make some observations about the impact on neuroinflammation.
Yeah, we looked at the effect of exposure on inflammation by measuring the levels of so-called pro-inflammatory cytokines in different regions of the brain. So that study is ongoing. So that's one approach to understand whether exposure causes inflammation, and which part of the brain is affected more than the other parts. And once we know that, is that part playing a role in motor function or behavioral function or both? So that's the approach we are taking. So once we have a better picture of, brain inflammation, we can, go further in answering the questions.
It'll certainly be interesting if it's influencing an area, region more connected to motor function, and then you're seeing that in your behavioral activities would really help to strengthen that. So that's very interesting. Thank you.
And also, after when we perform the staining of brain sections, that will also be revealing as to is there any injury to the brain, certain part of the brain. in association with the inflammation we see. So those would be very interesting to correlate.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, we have made it to our second short break, and so we'll take a break until 10:50, and then we will start up with our third session, which Dr. Casanova will be moderating. So very quick break, and we'll see you in about 4 minutes.
I think we should go ahead and get started to keep us on time. Welcome. We are now starting with presentations in group 3. This is environmental and occupational epidemiology. We have 3 presenters, Mr. Alvin Estacio, Dr. Jerome Hassel, and Futing Wu, Dr. Wu. We will continue to save questions until all 3 presentations have been played. So let's get started.
Hello, my name is Alvin Estacio, and I am a PhD epidemiology student at the UTHealth School of Public Health. Today, I will be presenting on a pilot project titled The Implementation of a Diabetes Prevention Program Among Hispanic Female Domestic Cleaners, a Feasibility Study. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic condition where certain lifestyle factors eventually lead to chronic insulin resistance, where cells fail to properly uptake glucose. This leads to sustained high blood sugar, and if left uncontrolled, can lead to a variety of health issues. Individuals may be considered pre-diabetic, where blood sugar ranges are above normal, but not quite high enough to be diabetes. Prediabetes increases risk of developing diabetes. Even though the health implications of diabetes are more concerning, the health risks associated with prediabetes are not trivial. Overall, diabetes is a substantial public health and economic burden. About 1 in 10 adults in the U.S. have diabetes. It is the most expensive chronic illness, costing the U.S. about $327 billion annually, mostly due to direct medical costs, but also due to reduced work productivity related to diabetes. Type 2 diabetes can be prevented through lifestyle interventions to promote behaviors that reduce the risk of diabetes. The CDC has a National Diabetes Prevention Program, or DPP for short, that provides the infrastructure to host low-cost DPPs. The program is effective in preventing diabetes, but retention is often poor, where national retention rate has been previously found to be only 36%. This pilot project focuses on DPP retention among Hispanic domestic cleaners because they represent a particularly vulnerable and underserved population, especially in the context of diabetes. Latinos in the U.S. have an increased prevalence of diabetes risk factors. Additionally, domestic cleaners often have limited access to wellness programs. With all that in mind, the primary aim of this pilot project was to determine the feasibility of conducting a CDC-recognized diabetes prevention program supplemented with a food incentive program and healthy cooking classes among Hispanic domestic cleaners. A secondary aim was to ascertain any preliminary changes in behavioral outcomes at the program midpoint. We partnered with Domesticas Unidas, a local community-based organization for domestic workers in San Antonio, to recruit domestic cleaners. To be eligible for the program, participants had to be a member of Domesticas Unidas and be at least 18 years old, and have been previously diagnosed with prediabetes or be considered at risk of developing diabetes. The main component of the program is the Diabetes Prevention Program. We partnered with San Antonio Metro Health's DPP, which is structured so that participants not only gain knowledge about diabetes prevention, but they're also in a group environment where they can discuss how they can overcome barriers to make sustainable changes. The DPP consists of 26 sessions over the course of a year. A supplemental component to the DPP was healthy cooking classes. We partnered with the South Central AHEC to provide healthy cooking classes taught by a certified diabetes instructor. The classes were designed to reinforce behavioral changes in line with the DPP by demonstrating technical food prep skills and healthier alternatives to familiar recipes. Another key component of our program is the food incentive program. For the first 5 months of the DPP, we provided food groceries once a month, which were specially curated to introduce healthier food options learned during the healthy cooking classes. For the remaining 7 months of the DPP, participants will receive a $55 gift card every month. Overall, this program has several overlapping components, so here is a timeline of the program and where we are currently. To this day, we've had 19 DPP sessions, and the 20th will actually occur later this afternoon. The program will continue through the rest of the year, and the program will close out in December. So overall, we were able to recruit 12 participants for the program. All participants identify as female and Hispanic. 9 of the participants are aged 60 or older, and 9 of the participants also indicated that they work part-time, while the other 3 work full-time. All participants indicated that their annual income was $30K or less. The feasibility of conducting a DPPM on these workers is mainly being evaluated based on retention, particularly at the program midpoint, which is the first 16 sessions that comprise the first half of the DPP curriculum. This time point is of interest because previous studies have found that retention through at least 6 months is sufficient to see improvements in health and lifestyle. So far, no participants have dropped from the program, but 2 of the participants have attended less than 75% of the 16 sessions. Over the course of the 16 sessions, weekly attendance ranged from 5 to 12 participants. The one session where only 5 attended occurred in March when most of them went on vacation. Excluding that 1 week, weekly attendance ranged from 8 to 12. There were 5 healthy cooking classes total, and 9 of the 12 participants attended at least 4 sessions, and there was 1 participant that did not attend any of the cooking classes. After the 16th session, we administered a survey asking about satisfaction with the program thus far. The survey consisted of 7 items, each asking for a rating between 1 and 4, where a rating of 4 indicated greater satisfaction. All items were rated relatively high, indicating participant satisfaction with the program by the midpoint. At the start of the program and at the midpoint, participants took a survey about self-efficacy and physical activity. At the midpoint, median self-efficacy for eating healthier, doing physical activity, and weight loss all increased. Similarly, median level of physical activity increased from pre-program to midpoint. These improvements in self-efficacy and level of physical activity provide some preliminary insight into program success. Overall, the program appears to be quite successful through the program midpoint based on high retention and satisfaction. For future work, we will reevaluate feasibility and program success again when the overall program finishes in December. And before I end my presentation, I would like to acknowledge my collaborators, Domesticas Unidas, San Antonio Metro Health, and the South Central AHEC. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Jimeno and Dr. Perkison for mentoring me throughout this project. And lastly, I'd like to thank the Southwest Center for Occupational and Environmental Health for the opportunity to conduct this pilot project. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Good morning. Thank you for watching this presentation. We're going to talk about tension-type chronic headaches and try to better understand their causes and consequences. I'm Jerome Mossel, an assistant professor at Oklahoma State University. It has been conducted by 2 undergrad students under my supervision. So chronic headaches are defined as 15 or more headaches per month persisting for more than 3 months. And it is a huge problem that affects more than a third of the population and lead to a staggering direct cost for US employers of $19 billion. That was the case in 2019. From the patient's perspective, the consequences are multiple, ranging from daily problems such as poor concentration and fatigue to serious long-term issues such as depression and drug addiction. Tension headaches are the most common form of chronic headaches in the general population and are caused by excessive tension of the neck or cervical muscles. The cervical spine is a marvel of structural engineering that provides us with large ranges of motion. However, the drawback is that any muscular imbalances may induce biomechanical issues. The 2 tools we're interested in are amongst the most powerful, the sternocleidomastoid mastoid in the front and the trapezius in the back. Researchers have identified muscle imbalances as a probable cause of tension headaches, but there is no clear consensus on the mechanisms at play. So this hinders the development of accurate diagnosis and treatment to mitigate the burden of the global healthcare system. Therefore, the goal of this study is to determine work-related postures that may lead to muscle imbalances, which in turn may cause chronic tension-type headaches. To achieve this goal, we will combine experimental, educational, or in silico investigations. We ask participants to stare at a screen holding different head postures while standing and sitting, although for now we will only focus on standing. So we ask them to hold a specific head position for 20 seconds while standing on an instrumented treadmill that recorded pressure under their feet to assess whole body balance. We equip the participants with 2 inertial measurement units, or IMUs, to check and record the head position, and 4 electromyography electrodes to record and quantify contractions of the 4 muscles investigated, the left and right SM in the front and the left and right TR in the back. So here is an example of the results for a specific trial. These graphs are visualized live to ensure the participant holds the targeted head posture, and we record the muscle electrical activities and the plantar pressure distributions under the feet, as you can. For this trial, you can see that the right trapezius muscle in orange generates 40% more force than the left one in purple. The expected but interesting to quantify finding is that head posture affects the whole body biomechanics. As you can see on the right, the pressure distributions under the feet are also unbalanced. Since we had some issue getting the funds, data collection is still going on, but from the few participants we tested so far, we can already stipulate that head postures have local and global effects on the body, and that some are definitely more detrimental when it comes to muscular imbalances. Regarding the computational part of the study, we used a simplified musculoskeletal model of the neck to compute the muscle forces needed to hold the 9 head postures of interest. From these simulations, we then estimated the muscle fatigue induced and their endurance, and assessed the potential compensatory mechanisms to overcome fatigue. Here is an example of a simulation. The first second is used to reach the targeted head posture, and the model holds this final posture for a few seconds. On the graph, we will plot on the vertical axis the muscle forces needed to hold the postures depicted on the horizontal axis. So here are the forces required for each posture. As expected, holding the head tilted forward increases the forces developed by the trapezius muscles in the back of the neck, since you displace the center of mass of your head away from the center of rotation in the cervical spine when you tilt your head forward. As a contrary, holding the head tilted backward is less demanding. Here we plotted the endurance of each muscle, defined as the maximal force a muscle can produce in percentage of the initial maximal force. Even for this neutral position, the force production of the trapezius muscle is reduced by half after only 8 minutes holding that specific position. 2 more examples here. So the first one on the left highlights lower endurance when holding the head tilted forward, with the force production reduced by half after only about 5 minutes instead of 8 minutes for the neutral positions, as we have just seen. The second on the right highlights side-to-side asymmetry when tilting the head towards one side. To study compensatory mechanisms, we ran simulations with fatigue muscles, which means they were only capable of producing 75, 50, 25, or even 0% of the force required to hold a specific posture. This is one example that shows the gradual increase of the force required by the VM muscle to compensate for the TR fatigue, and on the right, the corresponding decrease in endurance. So in conclusion, we confirm that specific postures lead to severe muscle asymmetry, but also decrease in endurance. Although this study is a first step towards a better understanding of the etiology of tension time headaches, further investigations are clearly necessary. This is a complex problem. We plan on finishing data collection this summer and fall and assess the effect of head posture on whole body balance. We also plan on computing the forces acting on the skull to link these muscle imbalances to intracranial pressure. And finally, we plan on submitting a R15 proposal to extend this study and look at what happens when we walk. So we would of course like to thank UTHealth for funding this study, as well as our past and future participants.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fuqing Wu. I'm a faculty in the School of Public Health at UTHealth Houston. So today I'm presenting our recent work about using wastewater-based epidemiology as a tool to track the drug use in the population. This work is funded by the Pilot Project's Research Training Program. As we know, drug overdose is a very serious societal issue, and the death has been rising since 1999, with over 100,000 deaths reported in the country in 2022. And about 75% of the deaths is involved in opioids. As you can see from the figure on the right hand, there are over 81,000 deaths involved in opioids in 2022 in the country. Of the different opioid drugs, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, accounts for about 80% of opioid overdose-related deaths in the recent years. And this situation is not any better at the local level. Our study area is the city of El Paso in Texas. El Paso is a border city between the US and Mexico and has about 700,000 people. Starting from 2019, drug overdose has become the #1 cause of the deaths, accidental deaths in the county, and there are over 100 deaths directly related to the fentanyl. So in this work, we target two drugs. One is fentanyl and the other is xylazine. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid and is 50 to 100 stronger than morphine, and the vast majority of fentanyl is illicit. And norfentanyl is one of the major human metabolites of fentanyl and is excreted into the urine and stool. Xylazine has a more common name called zombie bug. It's mostly used for animals, but there's an emerging trend that it used to be with fentanyl together. As I mentioned earlier, this project is to monitor the drug use by testing wastewater. Our study population is the city of El Paso. This city is served by 4 wastewater treatment plants. I simply name them as FH, HS, JT, and RB. The 4 plants serve a population from 100K to 400K, with a total of about 750,000. Just to showcase our protocol can work, we spiked the fentanyl reference into the 4 wastewater samples and processed them using a series procedures, and then quantified with ultrasensitive liquid chromatography mass spec. As you can see from this plot, that the fentanyl peak is very clearly detected in the 4 samples. This plot showcases that the protocol also works well for norfentanyl. It's a marker for human consumption of fentanyl. And similarly for xylazine and the xylazine's metabolite 2,6-xylidine. Next, we tested the limit of detection for fentanyl, norfentanyl, and xylazine. Using the reference standard solution, we seriously diluted them and quantified using the LCMS. So the lowest concentration for consistent detection in the wastewater samples are 0.1 nanogram per liter for fentanyl and for xylazine, but 1 nanogram per liter for norfentanyl. We also examined the stability of these 3 compounds in the wastewater samples. So we tested different water temperature ranging from 4 degrees to 50 degrees for different days, as well as the number of freeze and thaw cycles. So overall, what we found is the number of freeze-thaw cycles have the highest impact on the concentration of the 3 compounds. In other words, we should limit our freeze-thaw cycles for the sake of samples integrity. Then we use this protocol to analyze the weekly wastewater samples collected from the El Paso. As you can see, both fentanyl, which is the yellow line, and norfentanyl, which is the blue line, are consistently detected in all the tested samples from the treatment FH from January to June. And the concentration for fentanyl is about 10 nanogram per liter, and norfentanyl is about 5 nanogram per liter. Same for the samples from the plant HS. All the samples are positive fentanyl and norfentanyl, and the relative larger variation was found for both data. Also, fentanyl and norfentanyl were detected in the samples from JT, and the concentrations are quite stable over the time. Similarly, in samples from RB, we noticed there's a small spike during the week of March 25. So all this data have shown that fentanyl and norfentanyl are very prevalent in wastewater samples from the city of El Paso. Besides the prevalence, we further use this data to estimate the drug consumption rate in the population. So this figure transforms the drug concentration to the consumption rate based on the flow rate of each sampling day. As you can see from this figure, FH has the highest consumption rate of fentanyl in the 4 communities, with a maximum of about 600 microgram per day per 100,000 people. JT and RB are quite stable, while HS has a relatively large variation on the consumption. So we also tested xylazine and its metabolite in samples from FH. Contrast to the fentanyl norfentanyl, xylazine and 2,6-xylidine are only found for the 3 weeks from late March to early April, and as well as early May. We're finishing the testing of other samples. As a conclusion, we have established a protocol to detect and quantify fentanyl, norfentanyl, xylazine, and 2,6-xylidine in the wastewater samples. We also determined the limit of detection for the compounds, and our stability analysis shows the number of freeze and thaw cycles has the highest impact on the stability of the targets. With our protocol, fentanyl and norfentanyl have been consistently detected in all of the samples from the city. We further showed that there are high fentanyl consumption rate in the sewer shed FH. Overall, wastewater-based epidemiology can be used to monitor drug consumptions in the population. With this, I would like to thank my student Catherine, who helped on the processing these samples, and Dr. Feng Li at the Baylor College of Medicine for help on the testing, and El Paso Water for providing those samples. My great thanks to the SWCOEH Center for Occupational Environmental Health. This work cannot be done without their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for these really fascinating presentations. We have time for discussion and questions, so if you would please raise your hand, type them into the chat, or you can put them into the Q&A tab. The PIs would be happy to take your questions. I do have a question for Mr. Estacio. I was wondering how generalizable your findings are, and if you could or have thought about taking this program design and using it with other demographics, other work groups.
I think there's certainly, we can use it with probably workers that are similar to domestic cleaners. So domestic cleaners they're a vulnerable worker population. And I think in Texas, there's a lot of Hispanic workers. And it can also be generalized to probably other low income jobs where and other workers where they have like informal work hours or that similar characteristics as domestic cleaners.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I actually had 2 questions, but I might start with Alvin. On your study, looking at the influence that this program had, it seems like the provision of some supplemental food assistance was also a strong contribution to participation, and I wonder if that would help strengthen some other programs that are happening at the community level as far as trying to engage people in a combination of 2 activities where they might be receiving food from a food bank or something like that, but also getting some of this intervention that you're looking at doing.
Yeah, I think for this program and for the participants, they really enjoyed the healthy cooking classes, and for and the groceries that they got when they were taking the healthy cooking classes. And I think that could certainly be used for other types of programs, especially for ones that are as long as this. So a year is a very long time for people to be involved with the program. So I also think that having the continuing, even though the healthy cooking classes are over, continuing the gift card incentives, I think also very helpful. So.
Thanks. We can come back to my other question later. That's fine. That's for another participant.
Yep, we have two other questions for Alvin. The first is in the chat from Vijay Boggaram. Alvin, have you considered that exposure to cleaning products may increase diabetes risk in domestic workers? And have you thought about use of appropriate PPEs to reduce the risk?
So I've definitely heard about exposure to cleaning products and diabetes risk. The purpose of our feasibility study was more so to focus on the diabetes prevention program and retention with that program. But that's certainly something that we're interested in.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to that question, were the diabetic education and nutrition classes hosted at the hotel work site? And was childcare a concern for those not able to attend?
So the diabetes prevention classes, as well as the healthy cooking classes, were hosted at a local community center that were accessible to all the participants. And then for childcare, it wasn't brought up or really thought of, but what's ended up happening is that participants will bring their children to the community center, and luckily it's a community center, so there are activities for the children to do there, and sometimes they just sit in the classroom too. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Dr. Patel, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Hosel. So considering your research and also the prior research that you have studied, what are the most significant head postures you have identified that contribute to these neck muscle imbalances as well as subsequent headaches? And how do you think the knowledge can be applied to develop preventive strategies and ergonomic interventions for workers that are prone to these conditions?
Thank you for your question. Well, first of all, my apologies to everybody for being late this morning, especially to Dr. Lincoln. I was looking forward to your keynote and I missed it. So there are two main factors, and again, that's a complex problem. We are still collecting data on subjects, but from the model, what we can say is every time you tilt your head forward and every time you have an actual rotation, so this way, those will significantly increase the muscle imbalances. So now the issue we're having is that there is not a direct correlation between muscle imbalances and chronic headaches. So that's what I mentioned in the future work is somehow through computations, because that's the only way we can look at that, is trying to see when we have those muscle imbalances, how does it increase intracranial pressure, basically. So, or does it impinge a nerve, for example, in the neck that could also create headaches? So that's on the modeling side, that's what we can do. To be honest, measuring in vivo if those positions will create headaches or not, we would have to ask a subject to hold that position for like 1 or 2 hours and see if they get headaches. So I'm not sure in terms of the IRB if we can do that, but that's something we can do. So to answer directly your question, the two main factors we have seen are tilting your head forward, and any kind of left-right rotation would definitely increase the muscle imbalances. And in terms of prevention, so what we are thinking about is some kind of maybe a smart scarf. Everything is smart these days, so why not? With sensors, just basically like a simple accelerometer will give us an idea on the head position. a 3-axis accelerometer. So that could be something with those smart textiles, for example. That's something eventually we can think about. How can we maybe a brace or a scarf or something, or maybe a collar, a neck collar that would tell us if your neck has a weird or at least a detrimental position. I know there is something like that for the back. So there is something you can put, like a heart monitor you can put, and that will tell you if you're slouching or not in front of your computer. But I haven't, to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything for the neck. So that's something eventually that we can think about. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, Dr. Hosel, have you considered any particular work group that you could test in vivo, or where this would be applicable? I know I'm thinking of a particular one, but I don't know if you've thought about that.
Okay. Well, there are, I mean, many workers, obviously. Anyone who sits in front of a computer for the entire day, which is most of us, I would guess, or any kind of in the factory. So that's the other thing that we are looking at, is we have two positions, sitting and standing. And that's something that could be interesting to find out is, okay, is one posture more detrimental than another? We know that obviously the head posture will have an effect, but the fact that you're standing or sitting might also have an effect. But I was thinking any kind of workers that is sitting or standing for a long time could be a subject of interest. And so the proposal, the NIH proposal we have in mind would be to look at the effect of how we walk. Can that also trigger headaches if you have any issues in your ankle, your hip, or your knee? So all the people who are delivering mails and things like that, that's something we can also have a look at. What was the population you had in mind, if I can ask?
Sure. I do a lot of work in forestry and logging.
Yeah.
And logging is mostly mechanized now, and so you're sitting in a huge piece of equipment, and probably the biggest movement you make in the day is to turn your head to look behind you quickly.
Right.
And you do that all day long. So I, just thought it would be an interesting thing to look at with this group.
That would definitely be an issue, as we have mentioned. That rotation is fairly detrimental. Plus, in those big pieces of equipment, that's something we had in mind as well, but we didn't do it for that specific study, is look at the effect of vibrations. In those pieces of machinery, you have huge vibrations, so even if you don't move your head, you have to tense your muscles a bit more. And so that will likely increase the long-term risk of chronic headaches.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Okay, so there's a question for Dr. Wu. Did you test the tap water, and would it be possible that the tap water might also be contaminated with fentanyl, though at a much lower level?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so first, sorry, I didn't realize the video. I think the voice is not that clear. But yeah, to answer your question, we didn't test tap water. Right now, the study most focused on wastewater. I think there are some kind of regulations that you kind of don't want us to touch tap water because of the safety issues. Yeah, but I do see there is recent one paper from, I don't know which group, but there's one paper showing they tested like a whole bunch of different places in the country to test the thing. There are some positives results from that paper. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, my question was for Dr. Wu as well, so that's well timed. Dr. Wu, you noticed in the FH watershed that you had higher concentrations detected. I wonder if you have any sort of boots on the ground data from individuals in these communities about usage or overdose rates or things like that might help to confirm your observations that you have from the wastewater data.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Moore. That's a very great question. So, so to be clear, since I do not have the data like about the community or CO share that they have been using, or how many they're using, and even the death data, or like the reported EMS data. So we don't have that data yet, but I'm certainly very active looking for those data. I think we have those data mostly from we need a collaboration with fire department or from the health department. So, but that's certainly one of the ways that we'll be looking for. I think with this data, one good thing I would like would be like if we have this data, like wastewater data, and kind of like the data from the health department or from like the use data, or even the death rate data. I think we can kind of put them together, see the correlation, and kind of you can build a kind of a predictive model to kind of estimate or like forecasting the trends for the future, short term.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think if you can make that connection, you can really try to look at strengthening, funding for intervention programs, for, emergency measures in the community, those kinds of things. So that's really great. The work on this, ability to be able to monitor this on a consistent basis is really important, and appreciate the work that you and others are doing in identifying, numerous additional compounds that we can monitor in wastewater that, sort of has come out of our COVID testing of wastewater that began 4 years ago. So thanks for your continued work in this area.
Thank you. Very nice comments. Thank you very much. Yes, I think you mentioned a very good point about like with this data, we can kind of indicate the consumption rate of different communities, and potentially, so the next step would be like a combined collaboration with the health workers that can develop some intervention program, of course, on the community level. And we recently submit a proposal like based on this work to the Department of Health and Human Service. So that proposal based on the Houston population. So we have the wastewater data on the top, and that we have the statistical team to analyze and do modeling. And then we have the intervention team, like the HEALS program, led by Dr. Langabeer in Houston. So we kind of, I think that's the thing that's what you're saying. I think that's the direction we are going. Thank you.
Dr. Patel, you have a question?
Yes, I'll switch to Alvin. So Alvin, based on your presentation on the diabetes prevention program, what do you think are the key barriers and or facilitators that you identified that impact the participant retention in these kinds of programs and the program's outcomes?
So I think the biggest barrier has just been the time and commitment to it, because it's a long program, and for the first half of the curriculum, they were meeting weekly, which is tough for some of them, especially for the ones with larger families. They have other commitments, and we tried to schedule it at a certain time that worked for the group, but there's just some things you can't get around. And I think a large facilitator is just having the additional incentives, so the healthy cooking classes and the groceries, I think were huge for these participants. They were really able to discuss a lot, and a lot of them knew each other. So I think that was also a good facilitator, was the fact that they already knew each other a lot, and they're friends. So I could see how for other work organizations, how it could be beneficial to have DPPs through work at workplaces. And I guess I'd be interested in seeing how the retention plays out for the rest of the program. Right now, we're now in the monthly phase. So I think we'll have a better idea of kind of the barriers and facilitators once we get towards the end of the program after a year.
Great. The reason I've been asking this question is not only for what the primary results you get out of your project, but also I think you should be able to derive or kind of find some insights, that can help in development of these kinds of practices in vulnerable occupational groups. So, but regardless, great work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. A question for Dr. Hosel. Would sitting in different types of chairs make a difference in inducing or reducing chronic headaches?
Okay, thank you for your question. I haven't found a definitive answer in the literature. It will have an impact for sure, because especially the lumbar support, that will have an impact on your entire spine. So that will have an impact up to your neck. So it's likely, but I haven't seen any measurements or things like that. But that could be a good idea for a study to play on the lumbar support and see if there is a specific lumbar support that could help with reducing muscle tension. That's a great question.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Wu, I was wondering, have you had any concern with confidentiality? For example, I know that you can't identify individual households, but you're sort of identifying these areas within a city that maybe have more fentanyl use or the other drug, xylazine. Are you getting pushback in any way?
Thank you for that question. I think the general thing, people don't like go to that deeper level or like individual level. People are, well, at least right now, I think the council will be try to avoid that, because that will be go to individual person. People don't will know that, even not just for this study, even for the infection like HIV, there's a very huge privacy issue there. So I think people, we are getting back it's probably touching only to the community level for now. But if there's a further discussion that people it's okay, I think that can be due. But right now, even for me personally, I feel cautious to find out like who are sharing this, who are using this. That's going to be a little challenging there.
And aside from from us and other academics, who else would you present these results to? Is this going to be presented to the city of El Paso, for example, or other more community-oriented groups?
Yeah, thank you. That's very nice thought. So now, because we haven't finished the study yet, we still have some samples to finish. So, but the plan will be, we're going to share these results with the El Paso Water, who provided those samples to us. Like an example is, early on we worked with them. We found the monkeypox sparrows and pox sparrows in the El Paso sample, and then we shared the data with them. We do have a discussion with the public health department in El Paso, and so our role would be providing those data back to them, and if they are making decisions, the decision will be up to them to make. So we'll providing information to them. So the other audience, we have Texas Academic Public Health Institute, TAFE program led by our dean, Dr. Alvin. So we probably will also share the results, present the results to them, and see how they're feeling, because they have one a wastewater action plan group that it composed. They have like environmental scientists, they have epidemiologists, also officials from the Houston Health Department. So we're gonna So that's another place that I would seek feedbacks and see what they think. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for answering those questions. I know again, I think this is just really fascinating, but also considering sort of the flip side of it and what obviously it would be great to create interventions, but I'm just curious to see what other city agencies do with this information. Great work, though. Really fascinating. Thank you. Are there any other questions for this group? Thank you all then to these three presenters. Really, really great work. I believe we've come to the end. I noticed that we had a good stretch of time here for discussion, but I don't think that we need the entire 40 minutes or so that we had allocated. So I will try to make some closing remarks. Again, I just really, what a great group of speakers with projects that really have the potential to make lasting impact on occupational safety and health outcomes. So congratulations again to all the PIs. Great work. For everyone joining us, thank you so much for hanging with us for 4 hours. I really, this is energizing for me and exciting. I love hearing about the work that all of you are doing. I do believe this collaboration between two NIOSH-funded centers speaks to the power of leveraging strategic partnerships to keep workers across Public Health Region 6 and then more broadly across the country safe on the job. As I previously have mentioned, our Ag Center strives to build capacity for research among junior faculty and graduate students and residents, and also researchers new to occupational agricultural safety and health through our pilot feasibility studies. And I know that it's the goal of both our centers to support the next generation of researchers in occupational safety and health. And I do believe the symposium and our pilot studies PIs are a testament to this effort. We look forward to hearing full results from their work and also hope that you can join us in 2025 to hear from new pilot studies PIs that we're working hard to recruit. Please reach out to Dr. Patel or Dr. Moore if you have an interest in applying for pilot feasibility studies funding. I'd also like to recognize and thank Ms. Sylvia Santiago. She is the continuing education coordinator with the Southwest DRC. She's worked really, really hard to help us make this symposium a success over the last 4 years. So thank you very much, Sylvia, for your hard work, and Zoom worked very well. And so also in anticipation of next week, on behalf of all of us, we wish you a safe and happy Independence Day. So again, thank you very, very much for attending and supporting our pilot feasibility studies programs. I will pass the baton to, I'm not sure who's up next.
Dr. Feldmore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. And again, I want to congratulate all of our researchers. I think the symposium was excellent. The presentations were great. We know you had a lot of deadlines and requests for getting materials in, and we really appreciate everybody helping us out with that. I especially want to recognize and thank Dr. Casanova and Dr. Moore, and emphasize how important this collaboration is, and not only in Texas, but also in Public Health Region 6. And it's a lovely opportunity for us to all join forces and share our resources, because at the end of the day, we want everybody who goes to work to go home at the end of the day, just the way they came into work, if not better. So we really appreciate all of the contributions you all are making to pushing the science, leading the science. And I really want to encourage all of our researchers to please take this work and carry it forward and let us know what happened. We want to see your publications. We want to hear about your follow-on research. we want to know how this project also, we want to know how the pilot project research training in general can be improved. So if there are enhancements that we can make to make this more meaningful, we want to hear that as well. And Vanessa, thank you for recognizing Sylvia. She's done an incredible job in pulling this all together. So my congratulations to all of you, and appreciation to Dr. Patel, Dr. Casanova, and Dr. Moore for all of your hard work in seeing this off. I thought it was a great way to spend the morning. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thanks, Dr. Feltner. I definitely agree. It's a great joint effort between the two centers. So my thanks to you as the center director, to Sylvia for all the coordination, and to Dr. Casanova and Dr. Moore for the continued collaboration. I think this beautiful merger of agricultural side as well as the OC and environmental EPI side is showing its results. I mean, the insightful discussions that we have, the range of these projects that goes all the way from, let's say, ergonomics to all the way to machine learning, is vast. And I think we do end up with so many questions for our prospective awardees, and giving them opportunities to see what they can come up with in terms of new ideas, in terms of new applications to either the Southwest Center for Occupational Environmental Health, or the Egg Center. So I would like to thank you all, and also like to thank Dr. Lincoln for the wonderful keynote, as well as all of our current awardees for your fantastic presentations, as well as our prospective awardees. I see a few of them who are currently in the process to start their projects. So thank you for attending, and thank you for making this a successful event. With this, I'll pass on to you, Kevin, for any closing remarks.
Yeah, I'll just say thanks again to everyone. My encouragement would be that we would continue to work together. So we've all been introduced to one another now in this digital media, and I know that I have a few colleagues that I'm going to be reaching out to after this meeting, and I hope that you'll do the same. So lots of great opportunities for us to collaborate on research and sharing ideas, and so I hope that we'll all continue to take advantage of these opportunities to connect within our region and within our universities as well. So thank you to everyone. We look forward to continued opportunities to work with you, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend, and go make a difference in the lives of our workforce and the people that you interact with. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Great job.